Chapter 1, The Subject of Rumors. Victoria White sat at her desk, staring at the front page of the Linares Star News, in front of her. There was a group photo of her and someone else, clearly photoshopped, accompanied by an eye-catching headline. She couldn't believe such a ridiculous scandal had happened to her. "Good morning, Mrs. White." Just as Victoria White was glaring daggers at the newspaper, a familiar male voice sounded beside her. At the same time, a vanilla latte was placed on the desk in front of her. "Here's your coffee for today." Normally, Victoria White would immediately grab the coffee and take a sip, but today she didn't. Instead, she shifted her displeased gaze from the newspaper to the face of the person sitting across from her. Looking at his warm smile, as gentle as a spring breeze, Victoria White tried hard to suppress the anger bubbling inside her. However, the coldness on her face only deepened. She pointed her index finger at the headline on the newspaper and coldly questioned, "CEO Carter, do you have anything to say about this article? What's the matter?" Seeing that Victoria White seemed intent on questioning him, Ethan Carter, the man referred to as CEO Carter, finally realized she appeared to be upset. His gaze moved from Victoria White's face to the newspaper she was pointing at. There, in bold red letters, was the headline, "Special Valentine's Feature, Linares City's Golden Singles Ranking Unveiled." Below the headline, he noticed it was an article about a poll ranking the city's most famous singles, organized by Linares Star News. Ethan Carter ignored the photo and began reading the main content. He saw his name, someone who had recently been appearing in public more frequently, listed for the first time in the rankings, placing 9th in the Golden Bachelor category. Meanwhile, Victoria White, as a popular host and model with remarkable influence, ranked 3rd in the Golden Bachelorette category, right after A-list movie and music stars, climbing 2 spots from last year. "You moved up from 5th place last year to 3rd this year. That's something to celebrate," Ethan Carter remarked, both amazed and congratulatory, as he looked back at Victoria White, still puzzled about why she was angry. But the topic quickly shifted to him. "I'm quite surprised, I actually made it onto the list. What's even more surprising must be this part, don't you think?" Seeing that Ethan Carter completely missed the point, Victoria White finally lost her temper. She picked up the newspaper and read aloud, enunciating each word clearly, "The CEO of Pinnacle Entertainment, Ethan Carter, has made his debut on the Golden Bachelor ranking this year. However, rumors suggest he is currently dating Victoria White, the host from Linares Broadcasting Network, who ranks 3rd on the Golden Bachelorette list. If the rumors are true, the two might not have the chance to appear on this ranking next year." After hearing what Victoria White had read, Ethan Carter raised his eyebrows, his face showing a mix of surprise and amusement. However, the fleeting trace of delight in his eyes did not escape Victoria White's sharp observation. When their gazes met, her piercing stare made Ethan Carter quickly look away. He awkwardly explained, "These are just baseless claims by reporters. There's no need to believe them. Let's head to the morning meeting, there's still a lot of work to do." As soon as Ethan Carter finished speaking, he turned and walked toward the conference room. Watching his light-hearted steps, Victoria White's overwhelming anger suddenly dissipated by more than half, leaving only helplessness. She shook her head and sighed. Originally, her relationship with Ethan Carter was purely professional. Recently, however, they have been labeled as a celebrity and fan duo, or even as a novelist and muse, making things complicated enough. Now, with the addition of this article, she had a feeling their relationship would only grow more entangled. Ethan Carter, after finishing his words, turned and headed towards the conference room. Watching his carefree figure, Victoria White's fiery anger inexplicably subsided by more than half, leaving only a sigh of resignation. Initially, her relationship with Ethan Carter was simply that of business partners. Recently, however, they were burdened with the labels of idol and fan and author and muse, which had already complicated matters. Now, with this news report, she had a premonition their relationship would become even more convoluted. Chapter 2, The First Encounter. Time rewinds to 3 months ago. Linares City, early November. It wasn't even 7 p.m. yet, but the night had already fallen. Victoria White was driving while listening to the radio. When she heard the news report about the Linares Broadcasting Network, she instinctively turned up the volume. This afternoon, Linares Broadcasting Network and Pinnacle Entertainment signed a strategic partnership agreement at the Linares Cady International Hotel. Both parties have agreed to launch a brand new reality TV show about stars within the next 3 years, fully collaborate in producing variety shows and dramas, and jointly plan and develop new artists. Linares Broadcasting Network was the most renowned local station in the country, boasting many beloved television programs. The interview show, Linares Star Weekend, hosted by Victoria White, had consistently topped national ratings for over a year and was one of the network's flagship programs. Pinnacle Entertainment, on the other hand, was the most powerful entertainment company in the country, managing numerous famous artists and groups. The collaboration between the two was dubbed a formidable alliance by the media. The news report quickly ended. Realizing she was just one intersection away from her destination, Victoria White turned off the radio, made the final turn, and smoothly arrived at the venue for tonight's gala, the Linares Cady International Hotel. Victoria White passed through the security check and entered the building. This was her first time attending an event in the banquet hall of the Cady Hotel. Although she wasn't particularly interested in such business gatherings, she had come tonight to fulfill an assignment given by the program's general director. Only after completing her task could she leave. "Mrs. White, you're finally here." Chloe Young, Victoria White's assistant, had been watching the entrance. Seeing Victoria White appear, she immediately rushed over and led her to a lounge area in the corner of the banquet hall. The representatives from Pinnacle Entertainment have been waiting for a while now. "Will I be meeting their general manager tonight?" Victoria White asked casually. "That was the plan, but the person was changed at the last minute," Chloe Young replied as she guided Victoria White to the lounge entrance. Inside, a few people were seated sporadically. She pointed to one of them. The man lowered his voice and said, "The tallest gentleman over there is a senior executive from Pinnacle Entertainment." Hearing that it was a senior executive, Victoria White raised her eyebrows in mild surprise. Before coming here, Sandra Lane, the program's chief producer, had informed her that a joint project between the two companies was looking for a host, and Sandra had recommended Victoria White for the role. However, this recommendation needed Pinnacle Entertainment's approval, which was why she was asked to attend the gala for discussions. Victoria White had assumed she'd only need to meet with a mid-level manager, not someone as high-ranking as a senior executive. Though slightly taken aback, Victoria White didn't forget her purpose for being there. She stepped into the lounge area, and before she could approach, 2 people across the room stood up. The taller man took the initiative to greet her. "Good evening, Mrs. White." Under the room's lighting, Victoria White studied the man before her. He had strikingly handsome features, sharp eyebrows, bright eyes, and refined facial structure. He was exceptionally good-looking, with a tall, well-proportioned figure and long legs, even taller than the professional male models Victoria White had worked with. Based on her observation, he couldn't have been over 30 years old. "Hello, miss, I am Victoria White from Linares Broadcasting Network." The man proactively extended his hand to shake hands with Victoria White. She responded in kind, and their hands clasped firmly. "Hello, miss, I am Ethan Carter from Pinnacle Entertainment." After shaking hands, the man introduced himself. "I've admired Miss White's reputation for a long time. Finally, I get to meet you in person. You're even more beautiful than you appear on TV. Mr. Carter, you flatter me." Victoria White, having heard countless compliments, had grown immune to such flattery. She replied with a faint smile. Victoria White had no impression of the name Ethan Carter, but the simplest way to learn about him was through exchanging business cards. She took out a card from her pocket and handed it to Ethan Carter. "Mr. Carter, here is my business card. May I have one of yours? Of course. Ethan Carter happily agreed. He accepted Victoria White's card, then retrieved a business card holder from his jacket pocket. Opening it, he took out a card and handed it to Victoria White with both hands. Victoria White accepted the card and examined it closely. She noticed that Ethan Carter's title was CEO of Pinnacle Entertainment, which surprised her. Ethan Carter was so young yet already the head of Pinnacle Entertainment, and he had even taken the initiative to handle matters outside his responsibilities. Miss White, no need to be so surprised. Ethan Carter seemed to read Victoria White's thoughts. He smiled slightly, his expression a mix of charm and mischief, which didn't quite match the image of a CEO. I wasn't supposed to come today, but there's something I'd like to ask of you, so I personally requested this meeting. Something to ask of me? Victoria White repeated his words with some doubt, unsure what he could possibly require from her. Ethan Carter gestured for his assistant to wait in the lounge area outside. He then pulled out a chair for Victoria White, inviting her to sit. Once she was seated, he took the seat across from her. There's a young girl who's a devoted fan of yours. Her birthday is coming up, and she wishes for me to record a video of you sending her birthday wishes so she can watch it. Ethan Carter signaled the waiter to bring 2 glasses of champagne. Placing one in front of Victoria White, he began explaining his request sincerely. There's a young girl who greatly admires Miss White. Her birthday is soon, and she hopes for me to record a video of you wishing her a happy birthday to bring home for her to see. Ethan Carter had the waiter serve 2 glasses of champagne. He placed one in front of Victoria White before earnestly stating his request. Ethan Carter's explanation dispelled Victoria White's doubts. She glanced at Ethan Carter's left hand and noticed a ring on his ring finger. Though simple in design, it clearly indicated his married status. To fulfill the young girl's wish, Ethan Carter had humbled himself to seek her out. Victoria White surmised that the girl must be very important to Ethan Carter, possibly even his wife. It's just a few words of birthday wishes, of course, that's no problem. Victoria White didn't overthink it and, as if compelled, agreed to Ethan Carter's request. May I ask the name of the young girl who has prompted the CEO Carter to go to such lengths to find me? Her name is Sissai, and she's a very adorable girl. I have many photos of her on my phone, which I can show you later. But before that, let's discuss business first. Ethan Carter retrieved a folder from his briefcase and handed it to Victoria White. This is information about the new program, Star Speed Race. Please take a look. Chapter 3, Open and Hidden Struggles. Victoria White opened the file and began to familiarize herself with the program. Star Speed Race is a large-scale reality TV show for celebrities, co-produced by Linares Broadcasting Network and Pinnacle Entertainment, slated for release next year. 4 pairs of celebrity teams will compete across 8 cities in 4 countries worldwide. Each race stage will be scored based on task completion. The celebrity team with the highest total score will be crowned the champion. The winner will receive a reward from the sponsor, and a charity fund will also be established, with the sponsor donating in the champion's name to a charitable organization. The 4 star pairs participating in the program are all artists from our company. The current list includes actors, singers, models, and performers, ranging from well-known names to newcomers, Ethan Carter introduced. The program is still missing a host. General Manager Lane has recommended Mrs. White, and I believe Mrs. White is indeed a great fit for this role. At the moment, this program seems quite interesting, but I still need to know which guests will be participating in the filming. Victoria White, who was always enthusiastic about charity activities, found the idea of the champion donating to charity particularly appealing. The guest list is on the next page, Ethan Carter reminded her. Victoria White flipped to the next page and saw a list of 6 confirmed guests for the filming, but the list was incomplete. General Manager Carter, you just mentioned there are 8 guests, but the document only lists 6. Who are the other 2? One is a model currently abroad, his information will be added once he returns. The other is a singer about to debut, she's here, Ethan Carter explained while signaling to the assistant waiting at the lounge entrance. The assistant nodded slightly and quickly left. Soon, Ethan Carter's assistant brought a young woman into the lounge, standing before Victoria White and Ethan Carter. Victoria White stood up to greet her. The young woman's face seemed familiar to Victoria, but she couldn't immediately recall where she had seen her before. Ethan Carter introduced, "Mrs. White, let me give you a brief introduction. This is Sophia Collins, a singer signed with our company. The company has been preparing her debut for nearly half a year, and she'll soon be launching under the stage name Sunny. Sophia, this is Victoria White, a host from Linares Broadcasting Network." As soon as Ethan Carter mentioned the Chinese name of the newcomer, Victoria White's expression changed instantly. Her smiling lips froze, her gaze wavered, and her expression became complicated. Victoria White was not someone particularly interested in entertainment industry gossip, but she had heard about Sunny. Over the past few months, the leading entertainment company had been frequently releasing news about Sunny, teaser videos, promotional photos, and talent performances, all of which were widely circulated online. Although she hadn't officially debuted, Sunny already had a loyal fan base. Some companies were even considering inviting the young and beautiful Sunny as a brand ambassador, and her popularity rivaled that of established singers. However, the name, Sophia Collins, just mentioned by Ethan Carter stirred up some unpleasant memories for Victoria White. "Hello, Miss White. I've admired you for a long time." While Victoria White was still lost in thought, Sophia Collins tilted her chin slightly, her expression complicated as she assessed Victoria White from head to toe. As Sophia Collins scrutinized Victoria White, Victoria was also observing the woman standing before her. Sophia had her hair styled in an elegant updo, wore a floor-length golden gown, and accessorized with exquisite, expensive jewelry. For someone who was still a student like Victoria, this appearance seemed overly mature and ostentatious, perhaps even showy. Wait, why did the dress and jewelry Sophia was wearing look so familiar? While Sophia Collins was evaluating Victoria White, Victoria was also carefully examining the woman before her. Sophia's hair was styled in an elegant bun, she wore a long golden gown that swept the floor, and her body was adorned with finely crafted, luxurious jewelry. For someone like Victoria, who was still a student, this outfit seemed excessively sophisticated and formal, some might even call it ostentatious. Hold on, why did the dress and jewelry she was wearing look so familiar? Hello. Sophia Collins' gaze toward Victoria White was anything but friendly. After a brief moment of mutual scrutiny, Victoria finally spoke softly, reluctantly greeting her. Her eyes remained fixed on the sparkling necklace around Sophia's neck. "If I may ask, what brand is the jewelry Miss Sunny is wearing?" "This is sponsored by the SK brand." Hearing Victoria's question, Sophia Collins raised her hand to gently touch the necklace around her neck, her expression revealing a hint of pride. "SK is preparing to launch a high-end product line for young people, and I've heard I'm the only representative they've chosen." Victoria White had been the brand ambassador for the renowned fashion label SK for several years. Every season, SK sent her previews of their latest catalogs featuring new clothing and jewelry. She frequently appeared at events showcasing SK's designs. The collaboration between Victoria White and SK had always been smooth, but Sophia Collins had suddenly inserted herself into the picture. Given Sophia's background, Victoria couldn't help but suspect she was doing this intentionally. "I see. It seems this matter hasn't been finalized yet. Otherwise, as SK's ambassador, how could I not know about it?" Seeing the smug look on Sophia's face, Victoria felt a twinge of irritation, her tone growing sharper. "I've been representing SK for years now. Perhaps it's time for someone younger, like Miss Sunny here to take over." At this point, Ethan Carter, who had been silently observing the tense exchange between the two women, finally stepped in. "Mrs. White, Sophia is new and still learning the ropes. If she has offended you in any way, I hope you'll forgive her. Ethan Carter interrupted their conversation, apologizing on Sophia's behalf in an attempt to ease the tension. She's a new talent that our company is fully supporting, and I have high hopes for her future. She'll be participating in the filming of the show Star Speed Race. If there's a chance for her to appear on Star Weekend, I hope Mrs. White can offer her some guidance. Victoria White paid no attention to Ethan Carter's words. Memories of past events flipped through her mind like pages in a book. Feelings of grievance, jealousy, anger, and resentment surged within her. She glanced at Ethan Carter, and because of his defense of Sophia Collins, her impression of him worsened considerably. Victoria White didn't fully hear what Ethan Carter was saying. The past events unfolded in her mind like pages of a book, one by one. Feelings of grievance, jealousy, anger, and resentment surged from her chest. She glanced at Ethan Carter, standing beside her. Because he had spoken up in favor of Sophia Collins, her impression of him had significantly worsened. At that moment, the phone in Victoria White's handbag suddenly rang. She took it out and saw the name Vivian Moore calling, flashing on the screen, immediately realizing her best friend was urging her to attend the book sharing event. I have something to attend to, I'll take my leave. See you both later. Victoria White ended the call and looked at Ethan Carter and Sophia Collins, noticing they were both staring at her intently. Without thinking much, she quickly bid farewell to them and turned to leave. Miss White, please wait. Seeing Victoria White about to leave, Ethan Carter hurriedly stepped forward, blocking her path. About the video recording earlier. Mr. Carter, I'm sorry. I suddenly feel unwell and can't help you with this matter. Victoria White forced a faint, strained smile as she coldly declined Ethan Carter's request. Thank you for taking the time tonight to introduce the program to me. I won't forget this favor and will carefully consider whether to accept this job. I have something urgent to handle, so I must go now. As soon as Victoria White finished speaking, she sidestepped Ethan Carter and quickly left the lounge. Chloe Young hurriedly followed after her. Ethan Carter watched their retreating figures, frowning in confusion, unable to understand why Victoria White's attitude had shifted so abruptly. Chapter 4, Turns out she's a fan. After leaving the Caddy Hotel, Victoria White instructed Chloe Young to head home on her own while she made her way to Timeless Coffee. Upon entering the VIP section, the book-sharing event had not yet started, but most of the guests had already arrived. Vivian Moore had saved 2 seats in the front row, allowing Victoria White to easily take her place. Victoria White ordered a vanilla latte and a cupcake, engaging in light conversation with Vivian Moore after a long time apart. She then opened her handbag, pulling out an English edition of Demonic Doll and placing it beside her. The book's minimalist, abstract cover featured the author's name, Cassel, the detective novelist Victoria White admired most. Back in high school, a detective novelist named Cassel suddenly rose to fame, with his debut book creating a nationwide sensation. Victoria White was captivated by Cassel's clear writing style, gripping plots, and meticulous reasoning, quickly becoming one of his devoted fans. She read and carefully preserved every book he published. Over 8 years, Cassel released 15 detective novels. While his initial works were standalone stories, starting with the 5th book, Inspector Lake became the central character of his series. Readers followed Lake's journey from a novice to a legendary detective, solving cases with unparalleled skill. Victoria White met Vivian Moore, a schoolmate from a different class who also loved Cassel's novels, at the launch event for his 3rd book. The two fans instantly bonded, always finding ways to obtain the latest editions of Cassel's novels and sharing their thoughts after reading them. Later, when Victoria White went to study in the United States, she purchased 2 complete English collections of Cassel's works, one for herself and one as a gift for Vivian Moore. Thanks to their shared admiration for Cassel, Victoria White, who wasn't particularly close to her peers, developed a deep friendship with Vivian Moore. Occasionally, Cassel would autograph the covers of his novels. Publishers organized raffles or contests to select lucky fans who would receive signed copies. Victoria White actively participated in these events and managed to acquire several signed books. Cassel's signature, bold and free-flowing, inspired Victoria White to practice imitating it, hoping to improve her own handwriting. 3 years ago, Cassel won a prestigious literary award in France. On that occasion, he recorded a thank you message in French for the organizers, which was played during the ceremony. It was the only time fans got to hear Cassel's voice. His voice confirmed Victoria White's belief: Cassel was a young man with profound depth and a pleasant tone. Victoria White longed to meet him in person to express her admiration. However, this wish seemed like a distant dream. 2.5 years ago, Cassel published his 16th novel, Demonic Doll. While the first half of the book retained the familiar humor of his earlier works, the story took a sudden turn near the end. The final outcome revealed Inspector Lake committing suicide with a gun. In the epilogue, Cassel announced the conclusion of the Inspector Lake series and his indefinite hiatus from writing, leaving fans worldwide in shock. Some fans speculated that Cassel's decision was influenced by a temporary emotional state and believed he might revive Inspector Lake or start a new series once he felt better. However, contrary to their hopes, Cassel truly vanished without a trace, ceasing all publications as if he had never existed. Numerous rumors surrounded his abrupt disappearance, but none were ever confirmed. Unlike earlier predictions that Cassel's retirement would lead to his overshadowing by emerging authors, his hiatus instead boosted sales of his novels. Even now, publishers continue to profit immensely from reprinting his works. If Cassel were to return, sales would likely soar even higher. Unfortunately, despite waiting for years, Victoria White has yet to see any announcement from Cassel about a new work. Although no new works have been released, the book-sharing events spontaneously organized by Cassel's ardent fans in Linares City remain uninterrupted. Fans exchange views on the book's content, discuss the plot, and sometimes dream about Cassel's return. The theme of today's book-sharing session is Cassel's unfinished work, The Demon Doll. At exactly 8 p.m., after all the members had gathered, the VIP area was closed off to other guests, and the book-sharing session officially began. Tonight's reading alternated between Chinese and English. Victoria White and Vivian Moore were the evening's main speakers. Together, they selected a few of the most significant passages. Vivian Moore read the Chinese version, while Victoria White read the English version. The two coordinated seamlessly, taking turns reading before a small group of fewer than 20 people. She knew he would never return. The man who was once so dashing, elegant, and full of wisdom had forever departed from her. A soft yellow light shone diagonally on Victoria White from the front. Under the warm glow, she read the lines from the book in her precise American accent. The story had reached its conclusion. Her expression was sorrowful, her tone low, and a wave of grief rippled through everyone present. A few sensitive young women even began to quietly sob, dabbing their tears with tissues. Amid this solemn atmosphere, a sudden, misplaced, click echoed. Victoria White looked up toward the sound and saw a man not far away, holding up his phone to take pictures of her. When their eyes met, the man didn't stop but continued snapping photos, capturing the moment her slightly parted red lips revealed a hint of surprise. Looking closely, Victoria White recognized the photographer. It was Ethan Carter. This discovery left her astonished. Ethan Carter's name wasn't on the guest list for the book-sharing session, and theoretically, he shouldn't have been able to enter the VIP area. Yet, here he was, quietly present. Victoria White thought for a moment and concluded there could only be one explanation. After she had refused to collaborate on a video with him, he had followed her here, intending to take photos when she wasn't paying attention. Unexpectedly, he had been caught. The dramatic reading session has concluded. Next, we invite everyone to share their thoughts, Victoria White announced, closing the book. She declared it time for discussion before standing up and weaving through the crowd toward Ethan Carter. "Mr. Carter, may I borrow a moment of your time for a private conversation?" "Of course." Ethan Carter put his phone away and followed Victoria White out into the hallway outside the VIP area. "Mr. Carter, meeting you twice in one evening, what a coincidence," Victoria White remarked, slightly tilting her head to look up at Ethan Carter. A faint smile played on her lips, but her eyes were icy. "Mrs. White, I wasn't following you here. I came to meet Mr. Bryan for business," Ethan Carter quickly explained, understanding the implication in Victoria White's words. "I was just as surprised to see you here. Let's not talk about this anymore. I have a small favor to ask of General Manager Carter. Could you delete the photos you just secretly took?" Ethan Carter's explanation didn't convince Victoria White, but she didn't intend to beat around the bush and directly made her request. "If I delete the photos, would Miss White agree to let me take a few more shots?" Ethan Carter asked casually while fiddling with his phone. Victoria White recalled how Ethan Carter had just helped speak up for Sophia Collins at the Caddy Hotel earlier. Her gaze turned colder, and she crossed her arms firmly, shaking her head in refusal. "In that case, I'm sorry, but I won't delete the photos." Ethan Carter mimicked her defensive posture, crossing his arms as well. "Miss White, you once said you'd return the favor if given the chance. Well, now's the perfect opportunity. I believe Miss White wouldn't be so petty, would she?" Ethan Carter's words left Victoria White momentarily speechless, unsure how to respond. As she was figuring out how to counter him, Ethan Carter spoke again. "Miss White, are you here to attend the book reading event?" Ethan Carter asked nonchalantly. "It seems that author Cassel has been out of the game for quite a while, hasn't he?" "Excuse me, what did you just say?" "I said, you shouldn't waste your time on someone who's past their prime." "Stop right there." After confirming that Ethan Carter indeed referred to Cassel as past his prime, Victoria White was so furious she could hardly speak. Using an unusually serious tone, she retorted, "First, Mr. Cassel has only temporarily stopped writing, he hasn't left the literary world. Second, his novels are still among the top 10 best-selling detective novels to this day. Third, the number of global fans calling for Mr. Cassel's return is countless. Therefore, he is not past his prime. In my opinion, he never will be." Defending an author so passionately, "Looks like you're a fan," Ethan Carter teased with a nonchalant expression. Completely unaffected by Victoria White's righteous rebuttal. Instead, his tone grew even more mocking. "Unfortunately, a fan's thoughts don't represent the author's own. I happen to know a senior executive from Cassel's former publishing house. According to them, it's highly unlikely Cassel will ever make a comeback. I also know someone from that publishing house. According to her, everything is still uncertain. Perhaps Mr. Cassel will make a comeback next year, who knows?" Facing Ethan Carter's provocation, Victoria White raised her chin, refusing to back down as she spoke. The person Victoria White claimed to know from the publishing house was, in fact, Vivian Moore. After Cassel stopped writing, Vivian Moore, under the pen name UU, became the author heavily promoted by Linares Publishing. Occasionally, Victoria White would use Vivian Moore to gather any news about Cassel's potential return. In truth, Vivian Moore herself was unsure whether Cassel would truly make a comeback, but Victoria White didn't want to appear inferior. "Your dream is beautiful. Let's hope Cassel shares the same thoughts," Ethan Carter remarked, shaking his head with a smile as he observed Victoria White's confident demeanor. At that moment, his phone rang. Glancing at the screen, he said, "Mrs. White, please continue with your business. I have something to attend to." After finishing his sentence, Ethan Carter turned and walked away, answering his phone as he headed toward the door. Victoria White watched Ethan Carter's retreating figure, sneered disdainfully, then turned back toward the VIP area. Chapter 5, The Idol Appears. Victoria White encountered Ethan Carter twice in one evening, and her initial impression of him, which was somewhat favorable, quickly dropped to below standard. The next day, when General Manager Lane inquired about the previous evening's events, Victoria White firmly declined the position of MC for the program, Star Speed Race, and also expressed her desire for Sophia Collins not to participate in Starry Weekend. Although slightly surprised, General Manager Lane respected Victoria White's decision and used the excuse of a schedule conflict to help her decline the job. This matter passed smoothly. Afterward, Victoria White immersed herself in her busy work schedule and nearly forgot about Ethan Carter altogether. That afternoon, while preparing for the next episode of her show, Victoria White received an internal call from General Manager Lane, requesting her presence in her office. "General Manager Lane, is there something you need from me?" Victoria White stood at Sandra Lane's office door, knocked lightly twice, and entered upon hearing a response. She took a seat across from Sandra Lane at the desk. "Victoria, the station just concluded a meeting today, and I want to share part of the discussion with you." Sandra Lane handed a document from her desk to Victoria White. "Do you remember the program, Star Speed Race, that you previously declined? The rules have undergone some changes, and I think you might find it interesting now." "Not necessarily," Victoria White replied as she casually accepted the document and opened it. At first glance, the content seemed similar to what she had seen before, but before finishing the first page, her expression turned serious. She read aloud in disbelief, "Famous writer Cassel will serve as the race observer." Victoria White had never expected to see Cassel's name in the station's documents. She quickly skimmed through the rest and discovered that the so-called race observer was akin to a guest commentator, providing evaluations and analyses of the celebrity participants' performances after each race. Simply put, the host would handle the opening, while the race observer would manage the closing. This role required collaboration with the host. As this realization dawned on her, Victoria White's eyes lit up, and her mind began racing. If she could secure the hosting position for Star Speed Race, not only would she get to meet Cassel, but she could also become his colleague. Working together would provide her with a rare opportunity to interact closely with her idol. This was truly a golden opportunity. General Manager Lane, Cassel has never appeared in public before, and he stopped writing for many years. Why is he suddenly making an appearance? After a moment of excitement, Victoria White quickly calmed down, sensing something unusual. "Today, during the meeting between the station and Star Peak Entertainment, I raised this question as well." General Manager Carter explained that their company had acquired the rights to adapt Cassel's demonic doll into a television series and planned to collaborate with our station. They intend to invite Cassel to appear on the program for promotion. Mr. Cassel is very interested in the show Star Race and actively requested to become a member of the production team. Therefore, this special role of race observer was created, not only to meet Mr. Cassel's request but also to allow the audience to witness his charisma. During today's meeting with Star Peak Entertainment, I also brought up this issue. General Manager Carter mentioned that their company had signed the rights to adapt Cassel's demonic doll into a TV series and planned to collaborate with our station. They would invite Cassel to promote the show. Mr. Cassel showed great interest in Star Race and personally requested to join the production team, leading to the creation of this unique race observer position, both fulfilling Mr. Cassel's wishes and giving the audience a chance to admire his presence. Victoria White recalled her conversation with Ethan Carter at Timeless Coffee. At that time, Ethan Carter described Cassel as a washed-up writer, but shortly after, he signed a contract to adapt Cassel's novel into a series. Could it be that Ethan Carter secretly investigated and discovered that Cassel still had a massive readership, making his works worth investing in? Victoria, there's one more piece of news that will definitely make you happy. Just as Victoria White was lost in thought, Sandra Lane added, General Manager Carter mentioned that Cassel will be writing a new book. If everything goes smoothly, it will be released in a few months. Cassel is writing a new book. This news echoed incessantly in Victoria White's mind. She felt her eyes well up slightly. Cassel is making a comeback. She had waited so long, and finally, the day had arrived. General Manager Lane, if I want to compete for the host position now, is it still possible? Although Victoria White couldn't figure out what Ethan Carter was planning, it didn't affect her desire to meet her idol. As soon as Sandra Lane finished speaking, she eagerly asked. After you declined last time, I recommended 2 other hosts from the station to General Manager Carter. Their interviews are scheduled for this afternoon. If you contact him quickly, there might still be hope, Sandra Lane said cautiously. If you had accepted the job earlier, it would have been yours without question. But now that you've changed your mind after rejecting it, whether or not Ethan Carter agrees is entirely up to you. After leaving Sandra Lane's office, Victoria White hurried back to her own. She rummaged through her belongings for quite some time before finally finding Ethan Carter's business card in her bag. Carefully, she dialed each digit on her phone, took a deep breath, and pressed the call button. Beep, the call connected. As she waited for him to pick up, Victoria White recalled the previous conflict between her and Ethan Carter at Timeless Coffee. Her impression of him had plummeted, and she guessed his impression of her wasn't any better. Thinking about it made her even more anxious as the seconds dragged on. Beep, the phone continued to ring. While waiting for him to answer, Victoria White's mind replayed their past clash at Timeless Coffee. Her opinion of him had fallen drastically, and she assumed his view of her was just as poor. The prolonged wait only heightened her uneasiness. Hello, who's this? The phone rang for so long that Victoria White almost hung up, but at the last moment, Ethan Carter answered. His voice snapped Victoria White back to reality. Hello, President Carter, this is Victoria White from Linares Broadcasting Network, the host of Linares Star Weekend. Do you remember me? Victoria White bit her lip after speaking, unsure of how Ethan Carter would respond. Ms. White. Of course, I remember. Ethan Carter paused briefly before continuing, what can I do for you, Ms. White? It's about the host position for Star Speed Racing. I'd like to ask President Carter to reconsider me for the role, Victoria White said directly, wasting no time. If I recall correctly, Ms. White, you previously declined this role, citing a lack of time for filming. Have you changed your mind now? Ethan Carter's tone shifted slightly upon hearing her request, but he quickly regained his composure. May I ask why you've had a change of heart? Of course, it's because of Mr. Cassel, Victoria White replied without hesitation. Realizing her response might sound too blunt, she quickly added, additionally, I've reconsidered. If I manage my schedule well, filming won't interfere much with my current commitments. I'd like to challenge myself. Victoria White had expected Ethan Carter to reject her outright, given that she had previously turned down the opportunity. However, after a brief silence, he finally spoke, if Ms. White is determined to challenge herself, that's excellent. Come to my office at 3 p.m. this afternoon. For an interview? Victoria White asked cautiously. Yes, for an interview. Come alone, no need to bring your assistant. Whether you can reclaim this opportunity will depend entirely on your performance during the interview. Chapter 6, Attending the Interview. In the CBD area, where every inch of land in Linares City is worth its weight in gold, skyscrapers stand closely together, and Pinnacle Entertainment occupies an entire high-rise building. Although she had passed by many times before, this was the first time Victoria White set foot inside Pinnacle Entertainment, located not far from the International Caddy Hotel. Victoria White drove to the main entrance of Pinnacle Entertainment. After explaining her purpose to the receptionist, she was directed to a spacious, well-lit elevator. After swiping her access card, she pressed the button to the 32nd floor, the highest level. Upon arrival, Victoria discovered that half of the floor was dedicated to a conference room, while the other half housed Ethan Carter's private office and lounge. 2 other hosts from the Linares Broadcasting Network were already waiting in the lounge. One was a variety show host known for their humorous and witty style, while the other was a travel host with extensive travel experience. She silently calculated in her mind. For a reality show combining racing and travel like Star Speed Race, entertainment value and travel expertise were indispensable. As an interview host herself, she lacked significant experience in these areas. Compared to the other two hosts, her advantage of having interviewed numerous celebrities seemed almost negligible. Moreover, she had previously turned down this job opportunity. Even though she knew her chances of success were slim, Victoria White decided to take a gamble in hopes of securing the chance to work alongside Cassel. 3 o'clock quickly arrived. A person who appeared to be a secretary emerged from Ethan Carter's office, announcing that the three hosts should get ready. Each would have 5 minutes to converse with Ethan Carter. Whether they would become the host of Star Speed Race depended entirely on this 5-minute interview. As Victoria White arrived the latest, she was scheduled for the final interview. The two candidates before her entered one after another, while Victoria quietly observed their expressions. She noticed that they went in with cheerful faces but exited with serious looks, indicating that this interview was far from easy. Her heart grew increasingly anxious. When the secretary announced it was Victoria White's turn, she gave her makeup and outfit one last check before slowly approaching the office door of Ethan Carter. She gently knocked. "Come in." Ethan Carter's voice resonated from behind the door. Victoria White took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Victoria stepped forward a few paces, catching sight of Ethan Carter seated at his desk, typing on his computer. Today, he wore a perfectly tailored gray suit with a crisp white shirt beneath, exuding professionalism. Stopping in front of the desk, Victoria greeted him, "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter." "Good afternoon, Mrs. White." "Please, have a seat," Ethan replied, shifting his gaze from the computer screen. He waited for her to sit before pausing his work. "Would you like something to drink? Tea or coffee?" "Coffee will do," she replied. Victoria assumed Ethan Carter would call his secretary to bring the coffee, but to her surprise, he stood up and walked toward a hidden door seamlessly blended into the office wall. With a gentle push, the door opened. Ethan Carter entered the concealed space, turning on the light and starting to prepare the drink. Curious, Victoria craned her neck to catch a glimpse of what was inside. All she could make out was a pale pink wall and a few kitchen-like fixtures, but the rest remained unclear. Before long, Ethan Carter emerged from the hidden area, the door automatically closing behind him, cutting off Victoria's inquisitive gaze. She quickly averted her eyes as he returned. Placing a fragrant vanilla latte before her, he said, "It's been a while since I last made a latte. My skills might be a bit rusty, so I hope you won't mind if it's not perfect, Miss White." Victoria picked up the coffee and carefully took a sip. To her astonishment, the flavor was not only better than the coffee from outside establishments but even surpassed her own vanilla latte making skills, which she had honed daily. Surprised, but still reserved, she offered a modest compliment, "Your coffee-making skills are quite impressive, Mr. Carter." "Is that so?" "As long as you like it." Hearing Victoria White's compliment, Ethan Carter smiled faintly. Victoria White's tense mood eased slightly because of his smile, but Ethan Carter quickly brought the topic back, "We've had coffee, so we can get down to business now." "Of course." Victoria White put down her coffee cup, knowing that the official interview was about to begin. "Mrs. White, please tell me why you want to become the host of Star Race." "You have 1 minute," Ethan Carter said. "No need for many reasons, just one will do." Victoria White had already prepared several reasons, such as being a professional host, her strong interest in reality shows, and her prior experience with many celebrities. However, Ethan Carter limited her to just one reason. The minute passed quickly, and before Victoria White could react, the words, "I'm a huge fan of Cassel, I want to meet him and work with him," slipped out of her mouth, leaving her no time to regret it. Just for that? Clearly, Victoria White's answer was beyond Ethan Carter's expectations. He raised an eyebrow, his expression full of doubt. That's certainly a unique reason. Actually, last time at Timeless Coffee, I wanted to ask you, Mrs. White, this writer Cassel has never met you, and you know nothing about him. How can you be so infatuated with him? I'm not completely clueless about him. Victoria White tilted her head, thought for a moment, then confidently affirmed, I've listened to the audio of his award acceptance speech. I know he's a young man. He must have a good background and a solid education, I can sense that through his words. Moreover, I can feel his skilled writing, impeccable logical thinking, and powerful emotional expression. Only a perfect author can write perfect books. I love his books, so it's only natural that I admire and am curious about him. That's a fair reason, but Mrs. White, you should understand that this is a reality show centered around celebrities. While it's true we've invited Cassel as an observer, he's just that, an observer, not the main character of the show, Ethan Carter kindly reminded her. That won't be an issue for me. As I understand it, the host is responsible for leading the introduction, while the observer provides summaries. Though the roles are different, both serve the guests, Victoria White said with clear understanding. Moreover, since I won't be directly participating in the challenges and will stay in the monitoring room to oversee the filming, won't I have more opportunities to interact with Mr. Cassel? Hearing this, Ethan Carter stood up, deliberately drawing out his words, Ms. White. Mr. Carter. Victoria White also stood up. Seeing Ethan Carter extend his right hand toward her, she reached out to shake it. At the moment their eyes met, Victoria White was momentarily dazed, her heart racing. The two stood there, shaking hands and gazing at each other for a minute. Facing Ethan Carter's probing gaze, Victoria White felt a bit nervous. She lightly bit her lower lip, unsure of his intentions. Among the three hosts I interviewed today, you are the most suitable, Ethan Carter said after a long pause, firmly shaking her hand. Is there anything else you would like to instruct me on, Mr. Carter? Miss White, do you still remember Sophia Collins? She's the girl we met at the dinner party last time. Ethan Carter looked straight into Victoria White's eyes and spoke seriously. She's about to debut, and she hopes you can host the press conference for her new single. Additionally, she'd like to record a few episodes of the show Weekend Under the Starry Moon. Miss White, do you still remember Sophia Collins? She's that young lady we encountered at the previous dinner party. Ethan Carter's gaze didn't waver as he looked at Victoria White and continued earnestly, she's about to debut soon, and she hopes you can host the press conference for her new single. Moreover, she also hopes to record an episode of the program Weekend Star Planet. Victoria White had been in a cheerful mood, but Ethan Carter's words caused her heart to sink. She withdrew her hand, her gaze flickering as she looked at Ethan Carter. She wanted to say something but pressed her lips together, unable to voice her question. Miss White, you seem to have some doubts. Feel free to ask. Ethan Carter noticed Victoria White's hesitation and encouraged her to speak her mind. Mr. Carter, why are you so concerned about Sophia Collins? Victoria White hesitated for a moment before asking, her tone cautious. She's a new artist jointly promoted by your station and our company, and she's about to debut. If the first newcomer achieves great success, it will pave the way for smoother collaborations in the future. Naturally, I have to pay close attention to her. Ethan Carter paused slightly at Victoria White's question but quickly responded without hesitation, the program Weekend Under the Starry Moon, which you host, has the highest ratings on Linares Broadcasting Network. It's only natural for her to want to appear on the show. Is it really just because of these reasons? Victoria White lowered her gaze slightly and murmured. Actually, there's another reason. I've reached an agreement with Sophia's father, Ethan Carter said casually, assuming Victoria White was asking him. To be honest, Sophia comes from an excellent family, and her father is extremely generous. He's provided our company with some very valuable resources in exchange for a smooth career path for his daughter. Sophia Collins' father? So it's because of him. Victoria White felt as though something shattered inside her chest, leaving her breathless. She clutched at her chest, trying to calm herself. Even though many years had passed, hearing that name and recalling the events that transpired still caused her heart to ache. The pain, so deep it cut to the bone, hadn't lessened with time. Mrs. White. Ethan Carter noticed Victoria White's sudden gesture of clutching her chest and looked puzzled. He reached out, intending to steady her as she swayed, but she raised a hand to stop him, signaling that she didn't need help. Victoria placed both hands on the table, taking a few minutes to regain her composure. When she looked at Ethan Carter again, the discomfort from earlier had vanished, replaced by her usual professional demeanor. The decision on which guest will be interviewed on the Starlight Weekend program is not up to me. The station's hosts, when accepting external hosting gigs, must also get approval from the program director. Neither of these matters falls under my jurisdiction. Very well, I'll contact Director Lane and ask her to arrange these matters as soon as possible, Ethan Carter replied, nodding in acknowledgement. Seeing that Victoria White didn't outright refuse, he indicated he would handle the next steps himself. Today's interview is over. Mrs. White, you don't look well. If you'd like, you can rest for a while in our company's lounge. No need, I have other work to handle. I'll return to the station now. Thank you, and goodbye, President Carter, Victoria White declined politely, shaking her head. What she needed at this moment wasn't rest but to immerse herself in work, to drown out the painful memories that could resurface at any moment. Chapter 7, Filming the Program. After Victoria White changed her attitude and no longer wanted Sophia Collins to film for Linares Star Weekend, Apex Star Entertainment and Linares Broadcasting Network quickly reached an agreement. The decision for Sophia Collins to appear as a guest was made at an unprecedented speed. The filming schedule was set for early December, with the broadcast planned for the second Sunday of December, perfectly aligning with the press conference for her new single release. Every time she filmed Linares Star Weekend, Victoria White would always discuss with the guest beforehand. However, this time, she left the communication with Sophia Collins' team to her colleagues from the program crew. Even though she spent twice as much time as usual memorizing the interview script after it was finalized, she found herself forgetting almost everything she had learned. Deep down, Victoria White knew she felt conflicted about interviewing Sophia Collins. But what was done, so she could only grit her teeth and finish filming this episode. A week later, hello, dear audience, welcome to the talk show Linares Star Weekend, airing every Sunday evening on Linares Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Victoria White. Today's guest on Linares Star Weekend is at 3 p.m., in the studio of Linares Star Weekend, on the 16th floor of Linares Broadcasting Network. The large studio, spanning hundreds of square meters, was packed with fans eager to see their idol. Hello, host, hello to all the viewers watching from home, I'm Sunny. As Sophia Collins stepped out from backstage, the audience burst into applause. She appeared calm and composed, naturally handing over the demo of her single to Victoria White, who stood up to greet her. Hello, this is the demo of my debut single, which is about to be released. Please accept it. Thank you. Victoria White took the new single from Sophia Collins and glanced at the cover. On it, Sophia Collins wore a brightly colored candy jacket, striking a very adorable pose. At the bottom of the cover was the title of the single, Meow Meow, Come Here. Once both were seated, the interview officially began. Following the pre-prepared content, Victoria White asked questions, and Sophia Collins responded. Through her answers, Victoria White and the audience learned more about her. She was not yet 20 years old, a sophomore at Linares Music Academy, skilled in playing the piano and composing, with a passion for singing. After more than a year of rigorous training, she was officially debuting, with her goal being to become a versatile artist who excels in both singing and songwriting. Meow meow, the little cat quickly arrives. After both of them sat down, the formal interview began, revolving around the well-prepared script. Victoria White was responsible for asking the questions, while Sophia Collins answered them. Through her responses, both Victoria White and the audience learned a lot about her. She was not yet 20 years old, currently a sophomore at the Linares Music Academy, skilled in playing the piano and songwriting, with a passion for singing. After undergoing intensive training for a year, she had debuted, and her goal was to become an all-around artist like Subarashi. Yuta Wutao. Despite repeatedly reminding herself beforehand, when Victoria White finally saw Sophia Collins' youthful and vibrant face in the studio and heard her enthusiastically talk about her strengths, an indescribable emotion surged in Victoria's heart. She couldn't tell if it was admiration or jealousy, or perhaps, she was simply envious of Sophia Collins' seemingly perfect life, her unique talents, her pride, her supportive mentor who helped her rise to fame, and even more. Thinking about all the things Sophia Collins had that she herself lacked, a bitter feeling welled up in Victoria White's chest, one she couldn't suppress no matter how hard she tried. It felt as though a white mist clouded her vision, making Sophia Collins, sitting just an arm's length away, appear as nothing more than a blurry figure. Victoria White's sudden silence cast an oppressive atmosphere over the studio. Ethan Carter, who had taken time out of his schedule to quietly watch the recording from a discreet corner of the audience, immediately noticed Victoria's pained expression. He frowned slightly, deep in thought. Ethan Carter, seated inconspicuously in the shadows below the stage, sharply sensed that Victoria White was once again displaying that unmistakable look of discomfort. His brows furrowed slightly as he pondered. Victoria. Victoria. Just as Victoria White was lost in her thoughts, the director's anxious voice suddenly rang through her earpiece. Startled, she snapped back to reality, only to realize that everyone in the studio was staring at her, the person who had just been zoning out. Fortunately, Starry Weekend was a pre-recorded show. If it had been live, her mistake would have been far more serious. Having hosted numerous episodes of the show, this was the first time Victoria White had made such an unprofessional error. Thankfully, she quickly regained her composure, glanced at the teleprompter, and continued with the next question. Next, let's talk about your new single. Why did you choose this title? At the beginning of the year, my dad and I visited an elder's home, and this elder had a small white cat named Kitty, Sophia Collins began. As she spoke, the large screen behind her displayed a photo of her with the white cat. Kitty's graceful demeanor and beautiful features left a deep impression on me. While playing with it, a melody suddenly came to mind. I casually sang a few lines to my dad, and he loved it, encouraging me to turn it into a song. And as you all know, that song became my debut single. The relationship between Ms. Sunny and your father, Sophia Collins' voluntary mention of her father startled Victoria White. As Sophia finished her long explanation, Victoria struggled to suppress the nausea rising within her, forcing herself to appear unaffected, but she failed. Even she could hear the tremor in her voice as she replied, "That's wonderful. Yes, my dad is very supportive of my work. I will do my best and hope to receive everyone's support too." Sophia Collins, unaware of Victoria White's unusual demeanor, playfully winked at the audience and raised her hand in a V gesture, earning thunderous applause. After the recording session ended, the youthful, beautiful, and lively Sophia Collins won the affection of the entire audience and staff. Even Victoria White, who always held high standards and strict requirements in her work, had a slightly different view of her. However, just recalling past events forced Victoria White to suppress this faint goodwill, pretending to remain indifferent. Once the recording wrapped up, Sophia Collins was escorted out by her assistant first. As usual, Victoria White lingered on set for a while. Some audience members holding posters and photos of Victoria White lined up, waiting for her autograph. "Mrs. White, there's a little guest here." Victoria White had just signed 7 or 8 autographs when Chloe Young approached, leaning in to whisper softly. "Oh." Victoria White raised an eyebrow, glancing behind Chloe Young. Standing next to Chloe was a little girl, about 3 years old. The child had her hair styled in a ponytail adorned with a pink butterfly bow. Her fine hair slightly covered her forehead, and her large, sparkling eyes shone brightly. Her chubby cheeks, tinged with a rosy blush, displayed two small, charming dimples. She wore a pink princess dress and matching shoes, exuding an irresistible cuteness that captivated anyone who looked at her. Noticing Victoria White's attention, the little girl beamed a radiant smile. With Chloe Young's assistance, she squeezed her way to Victoria White's side and handed her a bouquet of flowers. "Sister Victoria, this is for you." "Thank you, Emily Carter." Victoria White looked at the carefully wrapped bouquet in her hands, gently inhaled the floral scent, and smiled. Emily Carter, a 3-year-old, was her youngest and most devoted fan. She was also a preschool student at the kindergarten where Victoria's wife, the producer of the program, Starry Weekend, worked. Thanks to this special connection, for the past 3 months, nearly every week, Emily Carter was brought by her nanny to watch Victoria White's recordings and would gift her small presents the little girl had prepared herself. It was quite surprising that Victoria White, often perceived by outsiders as a cold beauty, always smiled warmly when faced with Emily Carter. She accepted all the gifts the little girl brought and reciprocated with small presents of her own. Sometimes it was a toy, sometimes a piece of jewelry, and other times it was snacks that children loved. "Emily Carter, sit here for a while, okay? Later, Sister Victoria will give you some snacks, alright?" Victoria White made space beside her so Emily Carter could sit close. "Okay." Emily Carter nodded in agreement, then climbed onto the sofa to sit next to Victoria White, watching her sign autographs for fans. The little girl flashed a sweet smile at each person receiving an autograph, prompting everyone to exclaim in unison, "So adorable." After finishing the autograph session for all the fans, Victoria White took Emily Carter to her private dressing room. Before removing her makeup, she had a few spare minutes. She retrieved a rainbow swirl lollipop and a few candies from her bag. Victoria unwrapped the lollipop for Emily Carter while she herself enjoyed the smaller candies. The two of them sat on the sofa, eating candy and chatting. Watching Emily Carter eat the lollipop messily like a little kitten, Victoria White chuckled and used a tissue to wipe the little girl's face. The ticklish sensation made Emily Carter giggle uncontrollably. "Strange, why hasn't the makeup artist arrived yet today?" After a while, Victoria White looked up at the clock. Normally, the makeup artist would arrive right after she finished filming, but today it had already been half an hour, and there was still no sign of them. Just as Victoria White was about to call the makeup artist, Chloe Young knocked on the door. Both Victoria White and Emily Carter turned to look. Chloe Young hesitated before saying, "Miss White, General Manager Lane asked me to inform you that you don't need to rush to remove your makeup. Tonight, you'll be having dinner with General Manager Carter and Miss Sophia Collins from Pinnacle Entertainment." Chloe Young's announcement caused Victoria White to frown slightly. "Why do we need to have dinner together? There was no such arrangement before." Before filming this program, Sophia Collins had already invited Victoria White's entire department out for a meal. Victoria White had used work as an excuse not to attend. She had assumed that once filming was over, that would be the end of it. Who would have thought there would be another dinner tonight? General Manager Lane said that in a few days, Mrs. White will be hosting the press conference for Sophia Collins's new song release. Tonight's dinner is to discuss the details, so it's convenient to talk over dinner. Victoria White recalled the time in Ethan Carter's office when she hadn't declined his request. Now that Sophia Collins's program had been filmed, all that was left was to host the press conference, and then she would have the opportunity to work with Cassel. After a moment of hesitation, Victoria White reluctantly agreed, "Understood." Chapter 8, Running Away Together. Because Sandra Lane suddenly announced a change in plans, Victoria White's intention to finish recording the program and head home to rest was completely disrupted. After handing little Emily Carter over to the nanny and saying her goodbyes, she changed into casual clothes and got into Sandra Lane's car to head to the Katy International Hotel. When Victoria White and Sandra Lane parked on the B2 level of the Katy Hotel, they coincidentally ran into Ethan Carter and Sophia Collins, who had just arrived as well. The four of them entered the elevator together and were guided by the staff to a pre-booked private room. The room was beautifully located, offering a stunning view through the window, with a spacious round table surrounded by 6 chairs. This puzzled Victoria White. There were only 4 people dining tonight, so why were there 6 chairs? Could there be someone else joining them for dinner that she wasn't aware of? Victoria White intended to ask Sandra Lane if anyone else was coming, but Sandra was busy ushering Ethan Carter and Sophia Collins to their seats. Sensing it wasn't the right moment, Victoria kept her question to herself, deciding to take things as they came. The private room and the dishes for the evening had all been arranged by Sandra Lane. Once the 4 of them were seated, the staff began serving freshly prepared dishes, primarily Sichuan and Hunan cuisine. For Victoria White, who loved spicy food, the sight made her mouth water as her attention became entirely fixated on the food. Unlike Victoria White, who was engrossed in eating, Sophia Collins barely touched her food, focusing instead on chatting with Ethan Carter. Sandra Lane occasionally chimed in, making the atmosphere lively. From their conversation, Victoria White could sense that the relationship between Ethan Carter and Sophia Collins was far from ordinary. Rather than just being a boss and an artist under his management, they seemed more like close friends. She even detected a hint of coquettishness in Sophia Collins' tone when speaking to Ethan Carter, resembling a couple in a budding romance. Glancing at Ethan Carter's left ring finger, Victoria noticed he was still wearing his wedding ring. Such an obvious sign of being married couldn't have escaped Sophia Collins' notice. However, if Sophia Collins wanted to cling to a married man, that was her business. Victoria had no intention of meddling. Recording all afternoon must have been tiring for you, Mrs. White. I'm really looking forward to the broadcast of this program and hope the press conference for the new single will be a great success. The meal was progressing quietly when Sophia Collins suddenly shifted the topic, initiating a conversation with Victoria White. Victoria White responded curtly, still focused on her food. Her indifferent reply made the atmosphere awkward. Sandra Lane kept giving Victoria White meaningful glances, and only then did Victoria realize she might have disrupted the mood. Forcing a smile, she added, I also hope Sunny's new single press conference will be a great success. Although Victoria White was smiling, everyone knew her smile lacked any genuine emotion. Sophia Collins, being tactful, didn't pursue the topic further. She casually picked up some vegetables and lowered her head to eat a few bites of rice. Ring ring. Just as everyone was silently eating, Sophia Collins' phone, placed on the table, suddenly rang. She softly said, "Excuse me," then stepped away to take the call. A moment later, she returned. "My mom just called. What a coincidence. My parents are nearby for some errands and will drop by to see me later," Sophia Collins said in a calm tone as she set her phone back on the table. "I've invited them to join us for dinner. I hope no one has any objections." The moment Sophia Collins finished speaking, Victoria White's face instantly turned pale. She looked at Sophia Collins, who remained composed, in disbelief. Her heart raced, and she unconsciously began biting her lip again. "I fully support it," Sandra Lane said with a smile. "It's been a long time since I've seen your parents. It'll be nice to meet them today." Victoria White had assumed Sandra Lane would oppose the idea on her behalf, only to be surprised when she agreed without hesitation. Victoria glanced at the 6 chairs in the room, then at Sandra Lane, who was smiling, and suddenly began to piece things together. It became clear to her that Sophia Collins' parents hadn't happened to be nearby by chance. They were always meant to be part of tonight's dinner plans but had simply arrived later than expected. Realizing this, her expression darkened even further. "I don't have any objections," Ethan Carter said after glancing at Victoria White's pale face. He hesitated slightly before speaking. And what about you, Miss White? Sophia Collins shifted her gaze to Victoria White, her eyes full of expectation as she awaited her answer. At this moment, all three pairs of eyes were fixed on Victoria White. She felt a dull ache in her stomach, probably from eating too much spicy food earlier that evening. Standing up, she spoke with a hint of apology in her voice. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom for a moment." With that, Victoria White left the private room, her steps unsteady as she made her way to the restroom a short distance away. The restrooms at the Caddy Hotel were not divided by gender but were designed as individual private stalls, ensuring absolute privacy despite being unisex. Victoria White stood before the sink, absent-mindedly washing her hands. She looked up at her reflection in the mirror, her pale complexion prompting a sigh from within. While she wasn't entirely sure what Sophia Collins was planning, she knew she had no desire to meet Sophia's family, especially her father. "You're showing that expression again." Lost in thought about how to avoid Sophia Collins' parents, Victoria White was startled by an unexpected voice from the doorway, interrupting her train of thought. "Huh?" Victoria White snapped out of her daze and realized that the person speaking was none other than Ethan Carter. Unable to decipher his meaning, she asked with a hint of doubt, "What do you mean?" Ethan Carter stepped into the restroom and stood beside her, reaching out to grab her wrist. "This isn't the time to zone out. I'll take you out of here." "There's no need." Regaining her composure, Victoria White glanced down at Ethan Carter's hand gripping her wrist. Recalling the scene of him laughing and chatting with Sophia Collins during dinner, a wave of resentment surged within her. She coldly pulled her hand back. "If I want to leave, I can do it myself. There's no need for President Carter to trouble himself. If you leave through the hotel's main entrance now, you'll definitely run into Sophia's parents." Despite Victoria White's resistance, Ethan Carter remained persistent. "You don't want to see them, do you? I know this place well and can take you out through the back entrance right now. You won't run into anyone." "How do you know?" Ethan Carter's words struck a nerve, and Victoria White's eyes widened in surprise. She couldn't fathom how he had guessed her thoughts so accurately. "Just follow me, and I'll explain everything to you." Seeing that Victoria White had lowered her guard, Ethan Carter once again took her hand and led her out of the restroom, heading in the direction opposite to the private room. He seemed intimately familiar with the layout of the Caddy Hotel. In no time, he guided Victoria White to a corridor leading to an elevator that opened to the side exit. Releasing her hand, he pressed the button to call the elevator down. The elevator quickly arrived at their floor, and the two of them, one in front and one behind, stepped inside. Victoria White chose a spot far from Ethan Carter and watched as he pressed the button for B2. "This afternoon, during the recording of Starlit Weekend, I was also there." Ethan Carter slid his hands into his pockets, took a few steps back, and stood beside Victoria White. "When Sophia mentioned her father, that expression appeared on your face. Then I recalled seeing that same expression on you 3 times before. The first was in my office, the second on the set, and the third was tonight. Although I don't know the reason, it's clear to me that Mrs. White really dislikes Sophia's father. General Manager Carter certainly has sharp observational skills." Ethan Carter's guess wasn't entirely accurate, but it was about 70 to 80% correct. Victoria White pressed her lips together, beginning to admire Ethan Carter's ability to read people. However, her tone remained cold. "But this is my private matter. General Manager Carter doesn't need to concern himself with it. I don't mean anything by it, I just want to lend you a hand." Ethan Carter didn't elaborate further and simply responded calmly, "It's getting late. Let me take Miss White home." With a ding, the elevator arrived at B2. Ethan Carter and Victoria White stepped out one after the other. His car was parked not far from the elevator. Using a remote key, he unlocked the car and then opened the passenger door, gesturing for Victoria White to get in with utmost courtesy. I told my driver to pick me up in an hour, but since it's not time yet, I'll have to drive Miss White myself. After Victoria White got in, Ethan Carter closed the door for her, then walked around to the driver's side. He got in, started the car, and asked while adjusting the controls, "Where does Miss White live?" "CEO Carter, just drop me off at the main gate of Central Park. My house is nearby." Victoria White didn't want to reveal her home address, and Ethan Carter didn't press further. He pressed the central lock button and started the car. As soon as the car left the underground parking lot of the Caddy Hotel, Victoria White's phone rang. She pulled it out of her bag and saw that Sandra Lane was calling. She hesitated for a moment before answering, "Aunt Lane." "Victoria, where are you?" "Aunt Lane, I wasn't feeling well, so I left early." Victoria White knew exactly why Sandra Lane was calling. She bit her lip and awkwardly lied. "All right, go home and rest up." Victoria White seemed to hear Sandra Lane sigh softly on the other end, but her aunt didn't say much more, just gave her a few reminders before hanging up. "The relationship between Miss White and CEO Lane seems quite close," Ethan Carter remarked curiously as soon as the call ended, his tone carrying a hint of probing. "She's my youngest aunt. She's always taken very good care of me," Victoria White replied briefly, and the car fell into silence. Central Park wasn't far from the Caddy Hotel. 10 minutes later, Ethan Carter had already pulled up at the park's main gate. Victoria White tried to open the door but couldn't. She realized Ethan Carter hadn't unlocked the central lock yet. "CEO Carter, could you please unlock the door? I'd like to get out," she requested. "It seems Miss White has forgotten something," Ethan Carter said without unlocking the door. Instead, he leaned in slightly, naturally closing the distance between them. "I helped you tonight, but I didn't even hear a thank you." Victoria White looked at Ethan Carter, who was demanding gratitude, and thought he resembled a 9-year-old child asking for candy on Halloween. The comparison amused her slightly, but her expression remained composed. "That was my oversight. Indeed, I must thank you for your help tonight, CEO Carter." "Thank you. No need to thank me. Besides, Miss White, there's no need to be so formal. I only helped you because I'll need your help with something in return. Does CEO Carter want me to record another video?" Victoria White recalled their previous, mutual assistance, where Ethan Carter had taken a candid photo of her that he hadn't yet deleted. Now he was making a new request. "Of course not. My request is simple. I just hope that when you meet Cassel, you don't overreact or act too surprised." "Is that all?" Victoria White looked at Ethan Carter skeptically, unsure of what he was up to. However, she was always calm and composed. Even if she met her idol, she wouldn't scream or faint like others might. To her, Ethan Carter's request seemed entirely unnecessary. "I believe I can manage that." "Very good." Hearing her assurance, Ethan Carter smiled and unlocked the door for her. "It's getting late. Miss White, you should head home and rest." Chapter 9, Close Encounter. The press conference for the launch and announcement of Sophia Collins' new single is scheduled for December 12. Early in the morning, Victoria White and the film crew arrived at the Caddy Hotel. Sophia Collins' team was busy preparing in the banquet hall. Victoria White and Sophia Collins reviewed the schedule for the afternoon press conference together. After making a few minor adjustments, the morning rehearsal concluded. Victoria White and the film crew had lunch. During this time, she received a call from General Manager Lane, informing her that after the press conference, the manager of the Caddy Hotel would meet her to discuss an important matter. After lunch, the film crew began setting up cameras and adjusting equipment in the banquet hall. Meanwhile, Victoria White started getting dressed and applying makeup. Chloe Young had reserved a suite near the banquet hall as a dressing and makeup room to better protect Victoria White's privacy. When Victoria White arrived at the suite, a wardrobe specialist from SK Company was already waiting. The specialist presented her with a navy blue evening gown, along with a sapphire jewelry set and matching high heels. "Could this be the last time I wear your brand's designs?" Victoria White remarked with a hint of self-mockery as she looked at the exquisite gown and jewelry, then glanced at the makeup artist respectfully standing nearby. "Of course not. Our company plans to invite Miss Sunny as the ambassador for a sub-brand, but no matter what, Mrs. White's position as a brand ambassador will remain unchanged," the makeup artist hurriedly explained, her face turning pale at Victoria White's comment. "Please don't worry, Mrs. White, your ambassador role will not be affected." The makeup artist tirelessly consoled and persuaded, eventually managing to make Victoria White's expression soften a little. She changed into her ceremonial dress in the bedroom of the suite before stepping out into the living room. Chloe Young pushed a full-length mirror in front of Victoria White, allowing her to check her outfit. The delicate fabric, slightly cool to the touch, hugged Victoria White's alluring figure. The knee-length dress featured a subtly plunging V neckline, with a heart-shaped cutout at the back adorned with a butterfly bow. Her smooth, fair back was half exposed, adding an extra touch of allure. After an hour, the makeup and styling experts had given Victoria White a flawless, impeccable appearance. With 30 minutes left until the press conference, Victoria White decided to take one final opportunity to memorize her opening speech. While Chloe Young and the makeup team tidied up, Victoria White, not wanting to be disturbed, informed Chloe Young of her whereabouts and took her script to the backstage dressing room of the banquet hall. "Next, let's welcome Pinnacle Entertainment's CEO, Ethan Carter, to deliver his speech." Victoria White was intently practicing her lines when the slightly ajar door creaked open a little more. Through the mirror, Victoria White noticed someone entering. Thinking it was Chloe Young coming to inform her it was time to go on stage, she turned around, only to see that it was Ethan Carter. "Director Carter?" Victoria White asked, slightly puzzled, unsure why he would come looking for her at this time. "Is something the matter?" "Not at all. The press conference is about to begin. I just wanted to check if Mrs. White is ready," Ethan Carter replied casually as he stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. "I've already memorized my lines. I'm just reviewing them one last time," Victoria White said, shaking the script in her hand. She glanced at the clock hanging above the mirror and saw that it was 2:45 p.m., 15 minutes until the press conference began. Chloe Young would likely arrive soon to remind her to get ready. "Mrs. White, you look stunning today," but, as Victoria White checked the time, Ethan Carter walked up behind her, his gaze lowering to her back. "It seems the bow on the back of your dress is a bit loose." Skeptical, Victoria White tilted her body slightly and noticed that the butterfly bow on the back of her dress was indeed a little crooked. She casually said, "Thank you for pointing that out, Director Carter. My assistant should be here soon, I'll ask her to fix it." "No need to trouble her. I can fix it for you right now," Ethan Carter offered confidently. "I guarantee I'll tie it better than your assistant." "You know how to tie bows?" Victoria White asked skeptically, eyeing Ethan Carter with doubt, unsure if he could really tie a flawless bow. "My daughter Sissy loves clothes with bow ties. Every day, I have to help her tie them. These small tasks are no trouble for me at all." This was the second time Ethan Carter mentioned this Sissy. Hearing him say that, Victoria White felt more at ease. Ethan Carter was a married man. The last time he took her out of the hotel, it was simply to help her, and this time was probably the same. Surely, he had no ulterior motives toward her. "Then I'll trouble you, President Carter." Victoria White placed the script on the dressing table and took a small step back, allowing Ethan Carter easier access to help her fasten the dress strap. After receiving Victoria White's consent, Ethan Carter removed the bow tie from the gown, began adjusting it, and carefully tied it back. His movements were slow and deliberate. His long, slightly rough fingers occasionally brushed against the skin on Victoria White's back. The unfamiliar sensation, like an electric current running through her, made Victoria White shiver slightly, a complex emotion welling up inside her. She worried she might have misjudged him, fearing Ethan Carter might cross the line. Yet, he remained entirely composed. He focused solely on tying the bow tie, without any inappropriate actions. Less than a minute passed, but to Victoria White, it felt like an eternity. When he finished tying the bow tie, Ethan Carter rested his hands on her shoulders, signaling her to turn and face the mirror. "All done. Take a look." Victoria White looked at the bow tie Ethan Carter had tied in the mirror. It was perfect, simple yet slightly voluminous, both beautiful and unique. It seemed Ethan Carter's claim about frequently tying bows for Sisai wasn't an exaggeration. This. Victoria White stared at the bow tie, which was noticeably better than the one Chloe Young had tied earlier. For a moment, she didn't know how to express her admiration. "What's wrong? You don't like it?" Seeing Victoria White silent, Ethan Carter found it hard to guess her thoughts. "No, I think it's beautiful." Victoria White turned to look into Ethan Carter's eyes and sincerely said, "Thank you, President Carter. As long as you like it." Hearing her thanks, Ethan Carter exhaled in relief. He gazed at Victoria White's perfectly made-up face and suddenly shifted the topic. "Miss White, while you look stunning now, I still prefer seeing you with a bare face." "You've seen my bare face?" Victoria White furrowed her brows slightly, unable to recall when Ethan Carter might have seen her without makeup. "I watched the rehearsal this morning." "You weren't wearing makeup then. You looked fresh, natural, and exceptionally beautiful." Ethan Carter complimented her while stepping closer. Casually, he tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The intimate gesture left Victoria White momentarily stunned, unsure of how to respond. The distance between Ethan Carter and Victoria White grew closer, his warm breath brushing against Victoria White's cheek, carrying a hint of citrus and sandalwood. Meanwhile, the perfume Victoria White wore today was filled with the fresh scent of vanilla. The fragrances on both of them blended together, sparking dazzling sparks and ambiguous emotions. "Mrs. White, the press conference is in 10 minutes. Just as the two were gazing at each other, Chloe Young arrived at the door of the makeup room, knocked twice, and then pushed the door open. When she noticed both Victoria White and Ethan Carter in the room, standing very close to each other, the atmosphere seemed a bit ambiguous. Feeling slightly awkward, she swallowed back the words she was about to say. "Yes, I'll be there right away." Although nothing had happened between her and Ethan Carter, Victoria White still felt a bit flustered. Her face turned bright red, even her ears flushed. She grabbed the script on the makeup table and walked out of the dressing room without looking back, not sparing Ethan Carter a single glance. Chloe Young hurriedly followed after her. Chapter 10, Taking Photos Together. At 3 p.m., the launch and announcement of Sophia Collins' new single officially began. The event hall, though not large, was packed with hundreds of attendees, including executives and employees from Pinnacle Entertainment and Linares Broadcasting Network, along with reporters from nearly 100 media outlets and 100 lucky fans selected via Weibo. Amid the anticipation of the crowd, Sophia Collins and her dance crew were the first to take the stage. To the upbeat music, Sophia and the dancers performed with full energy, singing and dancing, captivating countless cameras from the media. The opening song and dance performance ignited the atmosphere. Following that, Victoria White stepped onto the stage to officially announce the start of the press conference. Ethan Carter, as the CEO of Pinnacle Entertainment, gave a speech and presented Sophia Collins with an expensive piano on behalf of the company. Sophia joyfully accepted the gift and promised to play a classical piece using the piano during the press conference, drawing cheers from the fans below. Next, Sandra Lane also took the stage, representing Linares Broadcasting Network to present an invitation to Sophia Collins, inviting her to be a guest on the program, Star Speed Race. She briefly introduced the other guests of the show, emphasizing that Cassel would join the filming as an observer. This news thrilled the reporters present, who scrambled to report it first to gain an advantage. The journalists and fans at the event all expressed excitement over the announcement, and Victoria White was no exception. Though hosting the event, she couldn't shout like the fans below, but her sparkling eyes revealed her genuine emotions. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter, seated in the audience, noticed Victoria White's delight and allowed a subtle, enigmatic smile to play on his lips. To help fans get to know Sophia Collins better, the press conference included an interactive Q&A session. Victoria White randomly selected one question each from social media platforms Weibo and WeChat, as well as one from the audience at the event, for Sophia Collins to answer live. The first question comes from a netizen on Weibo. Miss Sunny, what are your upcoming work plans? My main focus in the near future will revolve around 3 areas: filming for the show Star Speed Race, recording a new album, and acting in a television drama. Star Speed Race will begin filming this month and is expected to air early next year. The new album is currently in the song selection phase and will likely be released mid-next year. As for the TV drama, it's a very special project for me, as I came up with the main storyline myself. Additionally, I will take on the lead female role. The script is still undergoing revisions at the moment. Once there's official news about the production start, I will definitely share it with everyone. As soon as Sophia Collins answered the question, more netizens on WeChat submitted their queries. Victoria White picked the latest one. A user from WeChat has a question for Miss Sunny. What is the story of the television drama you're working on? You could say it's a coming-of-age story, but it's also an inspirational tale. Sophia Collins paused briefly before responding. It reflects my thoughts and observations about life over the past few years, summarizing the joys and sorrows I've experienced. Although, at my age, it might be too early to draw conclusions about myself, I still hope for a happy ending. What that happy ending will look like, please stay tuned to the drama to find out. Thank you very much, Miss Sunny, for your thoughtful response. The final question comes from a fan in the audience. Let's see what they want to ask. The staff projected the fan's question onto the LED screen behind the stage. Victoria White read aloud from the screen. This fan asks, Miss Sunny, you underwent over a year of training before debuting. Who is the person you are most grateful to? Today, as I stand here, there are 3 people I want to thank. First is my boss, Carter. Thank you for nurturing and wholeheartedly supporting me. Second is myself, because beyond the 8 hours of study each day, I dedicated an additional 8 hours to participating in various training courses. And the third person I want to thank is my best friend, Nathan Taylor. He has always encouraged, supported, and taught me so much, helping me avoid countless detours. Oh, by the way, he's here with us today. Since Nathan Taylor is here, why don't we invite him up on stage to greet everyone? Victoria White remembered that Nathan Taylor was set to perform with Sophia Collins today. Seeing Sunny take the initiative to mention him, she seized the opportunity to invite Nathan Taylor onto the stage. Nathan Taylor, without any hesitation, quickly made his way up. Nathan Taylor is a renowned pianist who has gained significant recognition in recent years. He is also a star guest on the show Star Speed Challenge. Victoria White had a brief interview with him, during which he revealed that he would be collaborating with Sophia Collins on the show to vie for the championship title. For some reason, as Victoria White watched Nathan Taylor speak and then glanced at Sophia Collins, who was smiling at him, she noticed a certain resemblance between the two. A peculiar thought crossed her mind: they really look like a couple destined for each other. Later, during the program's performance segment, Sophia Collins and Nathan Taylor performed a piano duet together. As the familiar melody began to play, Victoria White, standing nearby, felt her heart stir. They were performing Pachelbel's Canon in D variations, her all-time favorite piece of music. Nathan Taylor demonstrated an extraordinary level of piano mastery, while Sophia Collins, having practiced for many years, proved herself to be equally skilled. Through their dedicated performance, the melodies alternated between serene and majestic, resonating throughout the banquet hall. The soul-stirring music captivated everyone present, leaving the audience breathless as they quietly immersed themselves in the heavenly sounds. Nathan Taylor's piano skills were exceptional, yet Sophia Collins, having practiced for years, matched his level. As the two performed with all their might, the melody alternated between soft, flowing tones and bold, commanding notes that reverberated throughout the banquet hall. The captivating music left the audience breathless, silently listening to the heavenly tune. After Nathan Taylor finished his piano performance and stepped down, Victoria White followed the planned schedule, allowing Sophia Collins to select 3 lucky fans to join her in a dance lesson. The fan who performed the best would receive a grand prize, meticulously prepared by Pinnacle Entertainment and Linares Broadcasting Network, while the other 2 fans would each receive a signed copy of Sophia Collins' latest single. Following a humorous interaction with the fans, the next segment involved a group photo. Victoria White stood beside Sandra Lane, smiling at the camera as the photographer counted down, 3, 2, 1. Ethan Carter, who was initially positioned between Victoria White and Sophia Collins, switched places with Sophia just before the countdown ended. At the moment the camera clicked, he was standing close to Victoria White, posing for the photo with her. After the photo session ended, Victoria White glanced at Ethan Carter with slight confusion. She wanted to ask why he insisted on standing next to her for the picture, but since she still had to oversee the press conference until its conclusion, she decided to save her question for later. When the group photo session concluded, Victoria White cast Ethan Carter a curious look. She had originally planned to question him about his determination to stand by her side for the photo, but knowing she still had responsibilities to ensure the press conference ran smoothly to its end, she resolved to ask him about it afterward. The press conference will now officially conclude. Later, there will be a dinner reception for members of the media. We warmly invite all journalists to join us, Victoria White announced, bringing the press conference to a close. She then returned to her rented room to prepare and change outfits for the evening reception. Chapter 11, A Special Relationship. After the press conference, Victoria White returned to her room, removed the outfit sponsored by SK, and changed into a modest yet elegant long dress. Miss White, Miss Vivian Moore is outside the door. She asked me to check if she could come in. Chloe Young gently knocked on the door, seeking permission while Victoria was busy taking off her jewelry. Vivian is here. Let her in. Victoria White thought for a moment. She did indeed have an appointment with Vivian Moore today, so she instructed Chloe Young to bring her in. Victoria. Vivian Moore quickly appeared at the door, calling out Victoria White's name in an extremely friendly tone. You're getting more and more beautiful every day. I feel like I can't even compete as your best friend anymore. Stop being so sweet, Vivian. I remember we agreed to meet at Timeless Coffee at 8 p.m. tonight. Why are you here so early? Victoria White asked curiously, watching Vivian Moore walk toward her with a playful smile through the mirror. Were you at the press conference earlier too? Of course, I was. Sunny invited me to attend the press conference today. Vivian Moore replied, shaking the VIP badge hanging around her neck before casually sitting on the chair next to Victoria White. I was watching you host the event from the audience. I must say, your hosting skills are getting better and better. Hosting so many events like this, you get used to it. But... Victoria White smiled at the compliment but quickly shifted her focus. Sunny invited you to the press conference. Are you close with her? I just recently got to know her, definitely not as close as you are. Vivian Moore propped her elbow on the edge of the vanity table, tilting her head as she watched Victoria touch up her makeup. I took on a TV drama script, and Sunny is the lead actress in it. Is it the TV drama that was just announced at the press conference? Victoria White immediately recalled the drama mentioned on stage. She hadn't expected Vivian Moore to be involved in the project. That's right. Sunny is the lead actress in this TV drama. The concept and main storyline were written by her, and I'm responsible for developing the main story into a full script. The script is already completed, so filming should begin soon. No wonder you've been so busy lately. Even just asking you out for a meal takes so much effort. But you're not a professional screenwriter, so why did Sunny ask you to write the script? Victoria White couldn't quite understand how Sophia Collins, Sunny, got acquainted with Vivian Moore, but she had a growing sense that Sophia was gradually infiltrating her life. This realization left her deeply unsettled. This story is quite a coincidence. Sunny read my book and really liked my writing style. She had her assistant contact me, and we chatted once at Timeless Coffee. She showed me the main storyline, and I found it very interesting, so I immediately agreed to take on the role of screenwriter. Vivian Moore wasn't overthinking the situation like Victoria White, she was genuinely intrigued by it. Today, she invited me to attend the press conference, and later at the dinner party, I still need to continue chatting with her. This matter feels oddly coincidental. Sunny read my book, loved my writing style, and had her assistant reach out to me. We chatted once at Timeless Coffee, and she showed me the main storyline. I thought it was a very compelling story, so I agreed to take on the screenwriting work without hesitation. Vivian Moore, unlike Victoria White, didn't overanalyze the situation. She found it all very fascinating. She invited me today to join the press conference, and later during the dinner party, I'll need to continue chatting with her. Why do I feel like this isn't just a coincidence? Victoria White muttered, still skeptical that Sophia Collins coincidentally chose her best friend to write the script. Forget about that, I have something else to ask you. Vivian Moore suddenly switched the topic, winking with a mischievous glint in her eyes. You and Ethan Carter from Apex Entertainment, do you have some special relationship? What special relationship could I possibly have with him? Vivian Moore's question made Victoria White recall the incident in the dressing room before the press conference. Her face and ears flushed red, but she still denied it. His company collaborates with our station. I've only met him a few times for work. I don't think it's that simple. Vivian Moore pulled out her phone and opened a photo. Here, look, I took this at Timeless Coffee last time. Victoria White grabbed Vivian Moore's phone and saw the photo, realizing it captured Ethan Carter and herself. She immediately recognized it as the time Ethan Carter had secretly taken her picture at Timeless Coffee. That was the first time I met him. He was taking pictures of me during a reading event, and I was questioning him about it. It's nothing significant. That might not be a big deal, but earlier on stage during the group photo. He deliberately switched places with Sunny just to stand next to you, you know. That action is quite suspicious. Vivian Moore playfully winked at Victoria White, urging her to confess proactively. I'm sure you wouldn't take the initiative to seduce him, but could it be that he's pursuing you? Vivian, have you been writing too many romance novels lately? Is that why whenever you see a man and woman standing next to each other, you think they're starring in a drama? Vivian Moore's wild guesses left Victoria White both amused and exasperated as she seriously clarified, there's nothing between him and me, you're definitely overthinking this. Two good-looking people standing together can easily outshine everyone else. I don't think it's strange to think that way. Seeing Victoria White firmly deny it, Vivian Moore sighed in disappointment. I've even captured a few photos of you two together. I really thought there was something going on. Ethan Carter wears a ring on the ring finger of his left hand. Victoria White recalled the numerous interactions she had with Ethan Carter, the ring he wore, and the times he mentioned Sisai. Confronted with Vivian Moore's speculations, Victoria White's expression darkened unconsciously. You know very well how much I despise being a homewrecker. I'd rather stay single my whole life than destroy someone else's family. Victoria. Vivian was taken aback by Victoria White's sudden somber tone. Unsure of what to say, she could only stammer out her name. Sorry to interrupt your conversation. The room fell silent, and at that moment, Chloe Young gently knocked on the door, standing at the entrance to remind them. Miss White, General Manager Lane asked me to inform you that it's almost 5 o'clock. Your meeting with the manager of Kaidi Hotel is coming up. Vivian, I have some business to attend to. After I finish, I'll join you at the evening banquet. Don't forget, we still need to discuss things tonight, Victoria White said as she stood up, trying to brighten her gloomy expression. She calmly addressed Vivian. No problem, I'll wait for you in the banquet hall. Seeing that Victoria White was busy, Vivian didn't press further. She left the room with Victoria White. Once outside, Victoria White and Chloe Young headed left toward the meeting room, while Vivian went right toward the banquet hall. Chapter 12, Unexpected Crisis. Victoria White had just arrived at the meeting room door when she saw Sandra Lane waiting for her. The two walked in together. While waiting for the Caddy Hotel manager to arrive, Sandra Lane took the opportunity to discuss this collaboration with Victoria White. After completing her master's degree in the U.S., Victoria White returned to her home country. During her student years, her main focus was studying, with modeling as a secondary pursuit. Now, her primary career is hosting, with modeling taking a back seat. In the U.S., she landed modeling jobs purely by chance. Despite collaborating with the SK company since the age of 20, there were times when her studies caused communication gaps. Since her return, to avoid such situations, Sandra Lane proactively took on the role of her representative. Any company wishing to contact Victoria White must go through Sandra Lane's approval. Only after passing her evaluation does Victoria White make her own decisions. Currently, besides her contract as a fashion ambassador for SK, Victoria White also holds endorsement deals for food products, fast-moving consumer goods, and skincare. This time, the Caddy Hotel intends to invite Victoria White to become their global ambassador, promoting the hotel chain worldwide. Victoria, if you can secure this advertising deal, you'll become the face of a luxurious global hotel chain like Caddy. Your value as a representative will increase significantly. Sandra Lane analyzed the benefits for Victoria White while waiting for the Caddy Hotel manager, clearly leaning towards encouraging her to accept the deal. Aunt Lane, you should already know my principles when it comes to accepting endorsements. Victoria White understood that the Caddy Hotel was prepared to make a significant investment in promoting their ambassador, and the remuneration was highly attractive, but she had her own considerations. If they can't meet my requirements, no matter how high the pay is, I won't accept. These matters can be negotiated with them. During the conversation, a young man, appearing to be around the same age as Victoria White, entered the meeting room accompanied by two hotel staff members in uniform. The staff members closed the door to ensure a more private discussion. Before taking a seat, the man handed a business card to Victoria White and introduced himself. Hello, Mrs. White. I'm Evan, the manager of the Caddy Hotel, Linares branch. Victoria White accepted the card and noticed the Chinese name Andrew Fields printed on it. She took her handbag from Chloe Young, who was standing nearby, and handed her own business card to him in return. Hello, Director Fields. I'm Victoria White. Miss White, this is a welcome gift from our hotel. I hope you'll accept it. After shaking hands with Victoria White, Andrew Fields received a fruit basket from one of the hotel staff members beside him. He presented her with a basket of premium American Red Delicious apples. This type of apple, sweet and flavorful, happened to be Victoria White's favorite. Andrew Fields had chosen well, and she accepted the fruit basket with a slight smile, thanking him before passing it to Chloe Young. Previously, our hotel contacted General Manager Lane to propose inviting Miss White to be the brand ambassador for our hotel. We also plan to shoot promotional photos at several iconic Caddy hotels worldwide. After the greetings, Andrew Fields took a folder from another staff member and handed her a project proposal while explaining. Victoria White opened it and saw that the hotel intended to film advertisements at Caddy hotels in Linares Cooperation, Paris, France, Santorini, Greece, and New York, USA. These locations sounded familiar to her. Since we weren't sure if Mrs. White would have time to travel globally, we shared the proposal with Director Lane in advance. Director Lane mentioned that Mrs. White would be hosting a program called Star Racing, and the filming locations for the program coincided with the hotels we selected, Andrew Fields explained. They overlap completely, actually. Our program will also be filmed in these 4 countries, Sandra Lane added. Director Fields, your plan is excellent, but I have my principles when it comes to accepting endorsements. I hope you can understand. Victoria White responded after reviewing the proposal. She then stated her requirements. First, I don't endorse products I haven't personally experienced. Therefore, I need to personally evaluate the facilities and services of the hotels before I can promote them effectively. That's entirely reasonable. During your filming for Star Racing, you'll naturally visit the respective locations. After experiencing the services firsthand, we can proceed with the advertisement shoot. I'll make arrangements in advance with the hotels at each location to ensure Miss White receives the most impeccable service in their top-tier presidential suites. Andrew Fields nodded gently, indicating his agreement with Victoria White's conditions. The presidential suite is only prepared to entertain me alone, it feels a bit extravagant. Although her income was decent, Victoria White wasn't accustomed to an overly luxurious lifestyle. She gently declined, just a standard room will be fine for me. Understood. I will note Mrs. White's request and have the hotel management arrange accordingly based on the actual situation. Andrew Fields jotted down Victoria White's request in his notebook. His eyes glanced at a note beside it before shifting to another topic. Additionally, I understand that Mrs. White is a goodwill ambassador for the International Children's Fund. The brands you represent are required to donate a certain amount of money or goods to the fund. We have taken this into consideration. If Mrs. White agrees to represent our hotel, we are willing to donate an amount equivalent to your remuneration to support the fund's development. Hearing Andrew Fields' words, Victoria White felt a twinge of emotion. She had been planning to propose to the International Children's Fund the renovation of an orphanage in Linares City to help more orphans there. With the donation from the Caddy Hotel, everything would progress much more smoothly. Andrew Fields' words had indeed struck a chord with her. Victoria White felt both moved and a little surprised. She had represented many brands before, but there weren't many businesses willing to donate such a significant amount to children, like the Caddy Hotel. She glanced at Sandra Lane, who was smiling at her. Victoria White understood the meaning behind that smile. Director Fields, with your promise, I feel much more assured. Let's proceed with the next steps as per the usual process. Indeed, is Manager Fields going as well? I would like to represent the hotel to congratulate Miss Sunny. If Mrs. White doesn't mind, we can head to the banquet hall together. No problem. The staff member opened the meeting room door, and Victoria White and Andrew Fields walked out together, heading toward the banquet hall. Victoria White noticed Vivian Moore chatting with Sophia Collins at the long table. She pointed toward Sophia Collins, intending to lead Andrew Fields in that direction. However, the moment Andrew Fields saw the person Victoria White was pointing at, his calm expression suddenly turned pale. Without a word, he strode quickly toward Sophia Collins and Vivian Moore, leaving Victoria White behind. Everything happened too suddenly, and Victoria White couldn't react in time. By the time she regained her composure, she realized that Andrew Fields had already pulled Vivian Moore out of the banquet hall, and their whereabouts were unknown. Victoria White glanced at Chloe Young, who was walking behind, signaling her to split up and search. Victoria White searched the entire 42nd floor, where the banquet hall was located, but there was no sign of the two. 10 minutes later, Chloe Young emerged from the hotel's surveillance room and delivered a definitive piece of news to Victoria White. Miss White, it seems Miss Vivian Moore has been taken upstairs. This is already the top floor. What could possibly be above us? Hearing Chloe Young's words, Victoria White suddenly had a bad feeling. I asked the staff in the surveillance room. They said there's an observation deck above. Chloe Young pointed upward. But it's usually locked. Director Fields must have a key to access it. I'll go check it out. Chloe Young, go back to the room and pack all my belongings, then wait for me by the stairs. If anything happens, I'll come down immediately. Victoria, this is too dangerous. Sandra Lane, who had been standing silently beside her, tried to stop Victoria White's actions, her face filled with worry. What if something happens? Aunt Lane, don't worry, everything will be fine. Victoria White held Sandra Lane's hand to reassure her. Vivian is my good friend, I can't just stand by and watch her being taken away like that. Give me 10 minutes, I'll be right back. After instructing Chloe Young and calming Sandra Lane, Victoria White headed up the stairs to the rooftop. The door, usually locked, was ajar as expected. Victoria White pushed it open and stepped outside, the cold wind immediately rushing in. She braced herself against the biting chill and looked around for any sign of Vivian Moore. The rooftop viewing area wasn't large, allowing Victoria White a clear view of the entire space. Vivian Moore and Andrew Fields were standing about 10 meters away. With Vivian Moore's back turned toward her, Victoria couldn't see her friend's expression, but Andrew Fields' unusually serious demeanor made her uneasy, fearing he might do something harmful to Vivian. What exactly do you want? Vivian, marry me. Andrew Fields said as he magically pulled out a ring from his pocket and knelt on one knee in front of Vivian Moore. The scene before her left Victoria White gasping in shock. She was about to interrupt their conversation when a hand suddenly covered her mouth. Chapter 13, Ex-Boyfriend. Victoria White tensed up, raising both hands to pull away the hand covering her mouth. Fortunately, the person behind her didn't use much force, so she quickly freed herself. She turned around, wanting to see who had been watching her, only to be stunned by a familiar face. It was Ethan Carter. CEO Carter. Victoria White's voice was a mix of surprise and anger. She couldn't understand why Ethan Carter had followed her to the rooftop, let alone why he would act so inappropriately toward her. What are you doing here? Ethan Carter did not immediately answer Victoria White's question. He lowered his head, glanced at the hand he had just used to cover her mouth, a faint smirk appearing on his lips before he responded in a deep voice, Chloe Young told me you followed Evan and Vivian Moore upstairs, so I followed as well. Although I know you care about Vivian Moore, luckily, I went after you. Otherwise, you would have definitely ruined their moment. A moment? Clearly, it was harassment. Victoria White glared at Ethan Carter and firmly stated, what kind of lunatic proposes to a girl they've just met? If that's not harassment, then what is? You're right, no one proposes on their first meeting. Ethan Carter nodded slightly, seeming to agree with Victoria White, but then his tone shifted, but Evan is Vivian Moore's boyfriend. What's wrong with a man proposing to his girlfriend? Boyfriend? Hearing Ethan Carter's words, Victoria White was immediately stunned. How could she not know that Vivian Moore had a boyfriend? They broke up before, so it's normal that you didn't know. Ethan Carter noticed Victoria White's puzzled expression and explained in a calm tone. Victoria White carefully recalled, she and Vivian Moore had been high school classmates. Back in high school, Vivian Moore never dated. Afterward, Victoria White went to the U.S. for college while Vivian stayed in the country to continue her studies. Vivian had mentioned having a boyfriend a few times during phone calls, and Victoria vaguely remembered his name being Andy. However, by the time Vivian broke up with her boyfriend, Victoria had never met this Andy. Even if Vivian Moore's ex-boyfriend came looking for her, it should have been Andy, not Andrew Fields. But seeing Ethan Carter's firm conviction, Victoria White grew even more confused. I'm Vivian Moore's best friend. If I don't even know that Director Fields is her boyfriend, how do you know? She is Vivian Moore's best friend, and I am Evan's friend. Facing Victoria White's suspicion, Ethan Carter calmly replied, Vivian Moore's breakup left him almost devastated. It took him a long time to escape the shadow of heartbreak, and now that he's found Vivian Moore again, if you disturb them at this moment, wouldn't that be incredibly inconsiderate? How do I know if you're telling the truth or lying? What if Vivian doesn't even want to see him? Either way, I can't let Vivian suffer. Victoria White no longer had the patience to argue with Ethan Carter. She turned around, intending to push open the emergency exit door, but before her hand could touch it, the door was pulled open from the other side. Vivian Moore appeared in front of Victoria White with a heavy expression, while Andrew Fields remained standing in place. "Vivian, are you okay?" Seeing Vivian Moore's unprecedentedly grim face, Victoria White quickly grabbed her hand and asked with concern. "Victoria, I want to leave this place." Vivian Moore's hand was icy cold as she tightly held on to Victoria White's, forcing out each word with difficulty. "All right, let's go right away." Victoria White linked arms with Vivian Moore and helped her down one flight of stairs. Chloe Young, waiting at the entrance of the banquet hall, immediately approached upon seeing them. She held Victoria White's coat, intending to drape it over her, but Victoria White instead wrapped it around Vivian Moore. Taking her handbag from Chloe Young, she prepared to escort Vivian Moore out. "Victoria, what's going on?" Seeing Victoria White and Vivian Moore appear, Sandra Lane, who was pacing back and forth at the entrance of the banquet hall, approached to inquire. "Aunt Lane, it's nothing serious. Vivian is feeling a bit unwell, so I'm taking her home first," Victoria White replied casually while pressing the elevator button. "Aunt Lane, it's nothing major. Vivian is a little uncomfortable, so I'll take her back first," Victoria White added simply, pressing the elevator button to go down. "Are you taking her back by yourself?" Sandra Lane glanced at the pale face of Vivian Moore and then at the contemplative expression on Victoria White, quickly sensing that something unusual was going on. "How about letting Chloe Young drive? She can take both of you home." "President Lane, I have something private to discuss with Victoria." "It's better not to trouble Miss Young," Vivian Moore said with a faint smile, politely declining Sandra Lane's kind offer as the elevator neared their floor. Once the elevator doors opened, Vivian Moore and Victoria White immediately stepped in and pressed the button for the parking garage. Inside the elevator, the two remained silent. Upon reaching the parking area, Victoria White used her remote key to unlock the car. Each got in on opposite sides, and after fastening their seat belts, Victoria started the car. Just as she was about to set the GPS for Vivian Moore's apartment, Vivian suddenly made a request. "Victoria, I don't want to go home. Didn't you have something to talk to me about? How about we go to Timeless Coffee?" "No problem," Victoria White replied, glancing at Vivian's still pale face and deciding to comply with her request. It only took Victoria 10 minutes to drive to the cafe. The two walked into Timeless Coffee together. Brian, the barista busy behind the counter, noticed his regulars arriving and greeted them with a bright smile. "Good evening, ladies. What can I get for you today? Still the usual vanilla lattes? Give me a vanilla latte." "Vivian, what about you?" Victoria White nodded at Brian as a greeting, then turned to ask Vivian Moore's opinion. "My head hurts so much, coffee would make it worse." "I'll have a glass of red wine instead," Vivian Moore said, rubbing her temples, her complexion still pale. "Brian, we'd like to have a little chat. Could you arrange a quieter spot for us?" Victoria White glanced at the crowded cafe and gently suggested. "No problem. Both of you are VIP members here, so you can sit in the VIP section. The vanilla latte and red wine will be served shortly." Brian cast a glance at Vivian Moore before using the remote to open the VIP area door, allowing Victoria White and Vivian Moore to enter for their conversation. Victoria White and Vivian Moore sat in the VIP area for a while before Brian walked in carrying a tray. He handed Victoria White a fragrant vanilla latte but placed a glass of warm water in front of Vivian Moore instead of the red wine she requested. "Ms. Vivian Moore, given your current condition, it might be better to avoid alcohol. Warm water would be more suitable," Brian said as he placed an ibuprofen pill next to the glass. If your headache is too severe, you can take the painkiller. Thank you, Brian. Brian's thoughtful gesture warmed Vivian Moore's heart. She managed a faint smile as she watched him leave the VIP area. Before exiting, he carefully closed the door to ensure no one could overhear their conversation. Vivian, I originally wanted to discuss preparing a gift for Mr. Cassel tonight, but now. Victoria White sipped her vanilla latte, her gaze resting on Vivian Moore, who was curled up on the sofa across from her, lost in thought. She hesitated before continuing, I'm really curious about what happened on the rooftop earlier. If you're willing to share, I'm here to listen. But if you'd rather not, I won't press you. The person who pulled me up, his name is Andy Fields. He's my ex-fiancé, Vivian said, picking up the glass of warm water and taking a few sips before speaking slowly. We fell in love during college and got engaged right before graduation. But later, I discovered he was cheating on me. I returned the engagement ring, and to avoid his harassment, I moved to the U.S. Is this the reason you suddenly came to the U.S. that year? Victoria White still remembered that year vividly. She had just graduated from university and was planning to take advantage of the break before pursuing further studies to find an internship. Out of the blue, Vivian called her late at night, asking for her address. The very next day, Vivian appeared at her doorstep, looking utterly exhausted, which startled Victoria. Despite her repeated questions, Vivian refused to explain why she had abruptly come to the U.S. Today, Victoria White finally understood. Yes. Vivian set her glass of water down, covering her face with both hands in frustration. Her voice trembled with sobs. I haven't seen him in years. I thought everything was over. But who would have thought he'd suddenly show up today, pulling out the old engagement ring to propose to me? Is he insane? Seeing her best friend so distraught, Victoria White felt a heavy weight in her chest. She wasn't particularly skilled at comforting others, but after a moment of thought, she sat down beside Vivian Moore, gently patting her back in silent support. Vivian Moore cried for nearly half an hour. During that time, Victoria quietly handed her tissues while mentally piecing together the events of the evening. She was now sure that Andy Fields and Andrew Fields were the same person. Vivian Moore didn't seem to know that he had changed his name, likely something that happened after their breakup. Suddenly, Ethan Carter's words echoed in Victoria White's mind, Vivian Moore breaking up with him nearly destroyed him. She frowned in confusion, unable to make sense of it all. If Andrew Fields had indeed cheated, his near breakdown didn't add up. But if he hadn't cheated, why was Vivian Moore so heartbroken? Victoria White found the breakup back then to be incredibly strange no matter how much she thought about it. But at the moment, Vivian Moore was too fragile for Victoria to bring it up with her. All right, I've cried enough. I don't want to shed another tear over that scumbag. After using up the 10th tissue, Vivian Moore finally stopped crying. Victoria, let's talk about the main thing. You came to me tonight to discuss Mr. Cassel, didn't you? That's right. I mentioned it to you before, Cassel will be serving as the observer for the show Star Speed Racing. In a few days, I'll have a meeting with him, and it'll be my first time meeting him. I want to give him a special gift to let him know his fans still remember him fondly. Victoria White pulled herself out of her thoughts and got back to the main topic. That's easy enough. I'll go home and make an announcement in the fan club, asking everyone to submit their best literary and artistic works. Once I've gathered everything, I'll compile them into a collection, and you can give it to Mr. Cassel, Vivian Moore suggested. Having worked in publishing for several years, she was very familiar with this process. When do you need it by? The meeting is on Tuesday afternoon, so I'll need the gift by Tuesday morning at the latest, Victoria White replied. No problem. Let me rest for a bit, and then I'll get it done quickly, Vivian Moore assured her. Chapter 14, Shattered Illusions. Victoria White had completed the 2 tasks requested by Ethan Carter, and her representation contract with the Caddy Hotel was also finalized. The filming schedule for the program, Star Speed Race, was officially set. Before filming, all guest stars would attend a brief meeting, followed by individual photo shoots and promotional video recordings. The 4 groups of guests would take photos in teams. To gain more interaction with Cassel, Victoria White specifically requested the production team to place her and Cassel in the same group for the promotional photo shoot. With Sandra Lane's tacit approval, Victoria White successfully achieved her goal. While Victoria White was busy preparing, Vivian Moore was equally occupied. She spent a weekend collecting numerous fan creations dedicated to Cassel in Linares City. She compiled these works into a book, which included heartfelt messages and love-filled drawings. The thick book symbolized the admiration and support from Cassel's fans. Vivian Moore managed to deliver the book to Victoria White just in time before the meeting. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Tuesday in the large conference room of Linares Broadcasting Network. At Victoria White's earnest request, Chloe Young contacted Paula, Cassel's manager. Ultimately, Cassel agreed to arrive at Linares Broadcasting Network half an hour early. This allowed Victoria White, as a fan, to meet and have a private conversation with him in a small meeting room. However, Cassel also requested to bring his daughter along. Victoria White initially assumed Cassel was single and only prepared a gift for him. His sudden request to bring his daughter caught her off guard. After finding out the daughter's age, Victoria White went to the mall and purchased a cute little bunny doll as a meeting gift for his daughter. At 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday, Victoria White, with Chloe Young's assistance, moved 10 English edition books that she and Vivian Moore had yet to get signed by Cassel into the small meeting room. She intended to ask Cassel to sign all of them. While she was busy dividing the books into 2 stacks, a gentle knock suddenly echoed at the door. Hearing the knock, Victoria White quickly adjusted her hair. After confirming with Chloe Young that she looked fine, she responded, "Come in." The meeting room door slowly opened, and Victoria White stepped forward cautiously. She mentally rehearsed one last time what she wanted to say to Mr. Cassel. When the door fully opened, she clearly saw the visitors, a woman in her 30s holding the hand of a little girl in a red cloak. The woman's face seemed somewhat familiar, likely Emily Carter's nanny. As for the little girl's face, it was unmistakably familiar, Emily Carter herself. Victoria. Upon seeing Victoria White just a few steps away, Emily Carter broke free from the nanny's hand and ran straight to her, beaming brightly. "It's been so long since I last saw you. Emily Carter, why are you here?" Victoria White crouched down, holding Emily Carter's warm little hand, her expression full of surprise. "I came with my dad." Emily Carter eagerly snuggled into Victoria White's arms, ceasing only when she was embraced. "Victoria, I missed you so much." "Did you miss me?" "Of course, I did." Looking at Emily Carter, who obediently nestled in her arms, Victoria White felt a wave of warmth. Though her posture for holding a child was still clumsy, she held Emily Carter tightly as she stood up and walked toward the round table in the meeting room. "Emily Carter, Victoria has some work to do this afternoon. Later, I'll head to the office and grab some snacks for you, okay?" "Yes, ma'am." Emily Carter clung tightly to Victoria White, refusing to take even half a step away. "Miss Victoria, I saw the photo of you and my dad. The dress you were wearing was so pretty. Photo together?" Emily Carter suddenly mentioned a photo, but Victoria White had no recollection of it. She suspected Emily Carter's presence in the meeting room might have something to do with Mr. Cassel, so she asked, "Emily Carter, is your dad's name Cassel?" "Cassel? What's that?" Emily Carter tilted her head up at Victoria White with a slightly puzzled tone. "My dad's name is Dad." Emily Carter's innocent words made Victoria White laugh. She turned to look at Emily Carter's nanny, hoping she could clarify. "Mrs. White, you're correct. Emily Carter is indeed Mr. Cassel's daughter." Noticing Victoria White's gaze, the nanny stepped forward to explain. Mr. Cassel is currently discussing business with General Manager Lane. He'll be here shortly. So you really are Mr. Cassel's daughter? Hearing the nanny's confirmation, Victoria White gently pinched Emily Carter's cheek, growing even fonder of the little girl. She signaled Chloe Young to bring over the prepared gift. Emily Carter, this is a meeting gift from Miss Victoria. Will you accept it? I love bunnies the most. When Chloe Young handed over a pink bunny, Emily Carter's eyes lit up as she reached out to hug the doll, but then hesitated. Dad said I shouldn't accept things from others so easily. Your dad will be here soon. Why don't you ask him if it's okay to accept it? Emily Carter's strict upbringing impressed Victoria White. She didn't push the little girl to take the gift but left it for Mr. Cassel to decide. Emily Carter. Just as Victoria White and Emily Carter were chatting, a tall man entered the meeting room. He walked over to Victoria White and Emily Carter, extending his hand toward the little girl. Come to Dad, sweetheart. Daddy. Seeing who had arrived, Emily Carter obediently reached out her hand and was quickly scooped up into the man's arms. Victoria White stared blankly at the familiar face of the man before her, rendered speechless. Emily Carter, do you like this gift? The man, holding Emily Carter, asked her gently. I love it. Emily Carter replied clearly, looking at the stuffed bunny in her arms. I love everything Miss Victoria gives me. Then go ahead and accept it. What should you say to Mrs. White? The man smiled, teaching Emily Carter to be polite. Thank you, Miss Victoria. Emily Carter beamed brightly, loudly expressing her gratitude to Victoria White. Silence filled the room, not a single sound. Victoria White looked at the two figures in front of her, one big and one small, both staring intently at her. Both of them smiled, revealing 8 perfectly aligned white teeth, their curved lips looking identical. She had no doubt that the two people smiling so brightly before her were a father and son pair. Mr. Cassel. Even though the ominous feeling in her heart was about to become reality, Victoria White was unwilling to accept it and tried to struggle one last time. Yes, I am Cassel. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Victoria White. The man holding Emily Carter, Ethan Carter, smiled warmly, like a spring breeze, completely ignoring the slightly twitching expression on Victoria White's face. By the way, let me introduce you. This is my daughter, Emily Carter, whose French name is Sissy. Ethan Carter was Cassel, and Emily Carter was Cassel's daughter. This revelation echoed endlessly in Victoria White's mind. She tried to process the information she had just received but still found it hard to believe. Ethan Carter, the CEO of the entertainment company Sophia Collins admired, was actually the writer Cassel whom she idolized. And little Emily Carter, so well-behaved and adorable, was Cassel's daughter. Could there be anything more absurd in this world? Only now did Victoria White realize that the Sissy Ethan Carter had mentioned so many times was actually Emily Carter. So, whether it was filming videos, taking candid pictures, or even the deliberate photo opportunity at the previous press conference, it must have all been to please Emily Carter, not for the wife Victoria White had once assumed he had. For some reason, after learning that Sissy was merely Ethan Carter's daughter, Victoria White felt a wave of relief. However, thinking about how he had hidden his identity as Cassel made her look like a love-struck fool praising him to his face, and even used the filming project to force her to collaborate with Sophia Collins. She couldn't help but feel a surge of irritation. Victoria White was tangled in a web of emotions, feeling a bit like she wanted to explode in anger. But she was also afraid that losing her temper might scare Sissy, so she could only alternate between frowning and pursing her lips, completely unsure of how to express herself. Miss White, don't forget the promise you made to me. You said you wouldn't get too emotional or surprised when you met Cassel, and now it's time to keep that promise, Ethan Carter said, noticing Victoria White's face on the verge of erupting. His smile widened as he kindly reminded her. Hearing his words, Victoria White suddenly remembered. Last time, in order to avoid meeting Sophia Collins' parents, he had escorted her out of the Caddy Hotel through the back door. At that time, she had indeed made such a promise. Thinking back to how Ethan Carter had gone to such lengths to deceive her for so long, Victoria White grew even angrier. But because of her own promise and her unwillingness to set a bad example in front of Emily Carter, she forced herself to suppress her anger. "I certainly remember my promise," Victoria White said, taking a deep breath and trying to calm herself. "It's just that there's so much information all at once, it's hard to process. Give me a little time, and I'll be fine." I greatly admire Miss White's professional attitude. In the coming months, we will be working together on the show Star Speed Race. I look forward to a pleasant collaboration. Ethan Carter used his left hand to hold Emily Carter while extending his right hand to shake hands with Victoria White. She hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take his hand. Outwardly, she appeared calm, but in reality, she used all her strength, trying to squeeze Ethan Carter's hand to vent her frustration. To her surprise, he didn't even flinch. Feeling a bit disappointed, Victoria White released his hand after a brief struggle. "Sister Victoria will join Dad on the show. That's amazing." Emily Carter, unaware of the tension brewing inside Victoria White, cheerfully waved her plush bunny and exclaimed in delight upon seeing her father shake hands with Victoria. "Emily, Daddy has something to discuss with Sister Victoria. Why don't you go play in the play area with your nanny?" "I'll come pick you up later," Ethan Carter said as he held his daughter's hand. Seeing Victoria White's shifting expressions, he knew she had plenty to say. He handed Emily over to the nanny, instructing her to take the little girl out to play. "Okay, see you later." Moa, Emily Carter, now carried by the nanny, didn't forget to blow kisses to both Ethan Carter and Victoria White before leaving. Despite her complicated feelings, Victoria White mimicked Ethan Carter and blew a kiss back to Emily. Only then did the little girl contentedly allow the nanny to carry her out of the meeting room. The moment Emily Carter left, Victoria White's expression turned icy as she glared at Ethan Carter. Even the forced smile she had shown Emily vanished, and the atmosphere in the room grew noticeably colder. "President Carter, no, Mr. Cassel, this is a gift from the Cassel fan club in Linares. They hope you'll accept it." To avoid getting caught in the crossfire of Victoria White's anger, Chloe Young quickly handed the fan gift to Ethan Carter. After he accepted it, she made an excuse and swiftly slipped out of the meeting room. "I've stopped writing for so long, yet there are still so many fans silently supporting me. It's truly touching," Ethan Carter exclaimed as he flipped through the gifts from his fans, unable to stop expressing his gratitude. Victoria White stood beside him, coldly observing Ethan Carter's every move. The compliments she had prepared earlier were now thrown into oblivion, she no longer felt like saying a word. "Miss White, you surely have a lot to say. Go ahead and speak your mind." Ethan Carter had long anticipated Victoria White's reaction upon discovering his true identity. He smiled, encouraging her to voice her thoughts. Chapter 15, the protagonist of the new book, "If you really are Cassel, why did you say he was washed up? Do you find it amusing to tease me?" Victoria White pulled out a chair and sat down angrily, questioning him. She had always held a grudge over Ethan Carter's remark about Cassel being washed up. Now that she was certain he was Cassel, her discomfort immediately turned into anger. "I just wanted to use that as a way to confirm whether you were a fan." Ethan Carter shrugged, his eyes glinting with amusement. "In the end, just one simple, washed-up, comment ignited your fighting spirit. I must say, my plan worked perfectly." "Humph." The more smug Ethan Carter appeared, the more furious Victoria White became for falling into his trap. Without hesitation, she retorted, "You've completely ruined my good impression of Mr. Cassel. Then I truly apologize." Hearing her words, Ethan Carter chuckled softly. He closed the fan gifts, glanced at the 10 novels on the table, and pulled a chair to sit beside Victoria White. Taking a pen from his suit pocket, he prepared to sign the books in front of him. "Can I use my autograph to make amends?" Victoria White initially intended to reject him outright, but as her eyes fell on Ethan Carter's slender fingers holding the pen and his handsome face adorned with a smile, she hesitated. Among the books, 5 belonged to Vivian Moore. Even if she didn't want them, Vivian, a die-hard fan of Cassel, would undoubtedly cherish them. She couldn't make the decision alone. "These are all English edition books. It would be better if I signed them in English. May I ask the English name of the owner of these books?" Seeing Victoria White remain silent, Ethan Carter assumed she agreed to let him sign. He opened one of the books and asked. "These 5 books belong to my friend. Her name is Vivian Moore." Victoria White pointed to the stack of books near her, signaling Ethan Carter to sign them for Vivian Moore. "Vivian Moore." Ethan Carter murmured as he signed the book. His handwriting flowed effortlessly, exuding a sense of freedom and elegance. "The 5 books belonging to your friend are signed. These must be yours, right?" Ethan Carter didn't ask for Victoria White's English name but instead opened her books and began signing the first page. Curious, Victoria White stood up to see what Ethan Carter had written. He simply penned a straightforward line, "To Katie be happy," and, "From Cassel." This left Victoria White slightly surprised. "How did you know my English name? Is there anything about you that I don't know?" Ethan Carter chuckled softly, his gaze carrying a hint of tenderness as he looked at Victoria White. Victoria White was momentarily dazed, staring into Ethan Carter's dark eyes. His eyes were like a deep, tranquil lake, its surface calm and unruffled, yet beneath lay an irresistible depth, as if it were an unfathomable abyss drawing her in. She couldn't help but feel captivated, her heart fluttering uncontrollably. The two exchanged glances for just a few seconds, but to Victoria White, it felt like decades. If it had lasted any longer, she might have been completely drawn in by Ethan Carter's gaze. Fortunately, Ethan Carter looked away after a brief moment and continued signing. "All done. The 10 books have been signed," Ethan Carter said as he finished signing the last page of the final book. "Does this count as making amends? Just a few signatures, and you think you can erase the fact that you hid your identity and forced me to collaborate with Sophia Collins? That's too easy," Victoria White snorted coldly, clearly unwilling to accept Ethan Carter's attempt at appeasement. "I still can't believe you're actually Mr. Cassel. Looks like I'll have to work harder to clear the suspicion of being a fake Cassel," Ethan Carter said, putting away his pen. Facing Victoria White's stubbornness, he could only smile helplessly. "If I told you I'm planning to write a new book and even let you read the draft in advance, would you forgive me for hiding the truth before?" "New book? Are you going to bring Detective Lake back to life?" Hearing Ethan Carter say this, Victoria White's eyes immediately lit up. Releasing a new book meant Cassel was making a comeback. This was the best news for fans worldwide eagerly awaiting Cassel's return. "I wrote in the afterword of The Demon Doll that the Detective Lake series had concluded, and I intended to start a new series." Seeing the sparkle in Victoria White's eyes, Ethan Carter knew his words had successfully piqued her interest, which was precisely his goal. This time, the protagonist will be an extraordinarily beautiful and agile female police officer. As for her story, I'm still brainstorming ideas. Have you found the inspiration for the protagonist yet? Actually. Ethan Carter hesitated, leaving Victoria White slightly impatient. "Hurry up and tell me." Just as Victoria White was eager to learn more about Cassel's new book, Chloe Young knocked on the meeting room door. "Mrs. White, President Carter, it's almost 2 o'clock. The star guests of Star Speed Race have arrived in the main conference room. Please proceed there for the meeting." "Let's go, the meeting comes first." "As for what? You want to know, there will be plenty of opportunities to discuss it later." Ethan Carter stood up, picking up the sketchbook gifted by a fan, and prepared to leave. "All right then, let's head to the meeting first." What you want to know, there will surely be another chance to talk about it later. Ethan Carter rose, taking the fan-gifted sketchbook in hand, and made his way outside. Ethan Carter's ambiguous attitude left Victoria White slightly annoyed, but as he said, there would be many chances to ask later, so there was no need to rush. Chloe Young, take these books back to my office and place them on my desk, Victoria White instructed as she stood up. Then she followed Ethan Carter out of the small meeting room. When Victoria White followed Ethan Carter into the main conference room, she saw nearly 30 people already seated around the large meeting table. The 8 celebrity guests participating in the recording were accompanied by their agents and assistants, and there were also several camera setups in place. As Ethan Carter entered, everyone stood up in unison. Please, everyone, remain seated. Today, I'm not here as your boss for this meeting, so no need for formalities. Ethan Carter gestured for everyone to sit down. He casually chose 2 seats, first pulling a chair out for Victoria White. After she sat down, he took the seat next to her. Just as Ethan Carter settled in, Paula, Sophia Collins' agent, quietly pulled a chair to sit behind him. Greetings, esteemed guests. I'm Sandra Lane, the executive producer of Linares Broadcasting Network. Once everyone was seated, General Manager Lane entered the room. She opened the folder in her hands and got straight to the point. Today marks the first meeting for the Star Speed Race program. First, I'd like to invite everyone to introduce themselves. Victoria, please begin. Chapter 16, Colleagues Appear. Hello everyone, I'm Victoria White, the host of the Linares Broadcasting Network. I will be taking on the role of MC for the program Star Speed Race, responsible for opening and guiding the show. I look forward to working happily with all of you. Victoria White withdrew her gaze from Lucas King, stood up, and introduced her identity and role in the program. Great, let's move on to the next person. Hello everyone, I'm Cassel, a writer and also the race observer for Star Speed Race. After each challenge, I'll provide feedback on everyone's performance. These comments will influence your scores. I hope everyone gives their best effort. But if you don't perform well, don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Ethan Carter also stood up to introduce himself, speaking with a playful wink, revealing his humorous nature. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the meeting room showed a look of surprise. Victoria White, who already knew Ethan Carter's identity, remained composed, merely muttering a few words to herself. Let's invite the next person to speak. Sandra Lane noticed the astonishment on everyone's faces but didn't explain further, allowing the next person to introduce themselves. Hello everyone, I'm Sophia Collins. All 8 stars had finished introducing themselves. Finally, Sandra Lane gave a brief overview of the Star Speed Race program and the filming schedule. After the meeting, the 8 guests would divide into groups to shoot promotional photos. The first filming locations would be Paris and Nice in France, followed by Athens and Santorini in Greece. The filming duration would be 1 week, starting this weekend. That's the general plan for now. If anyone has questions about the production team or the participating guests, feel free to ask. Sandra Lane wrapped up her introduction and announced the Q&A session. Victoria White had no questions. She glanced at Sophia Collins and Nathan Taylor, who were whispering to each other across the room, guessing they had something to say. Mr. Carter, may I ask a bold question? Are you truly the legendary writer Cassel, who has never revealed his identity but is incredibly famous? Sophia Collins hesitated for a moment but finally summoned the courage to ask Ethan Carter. Yes. Ethan Carter was not surprised by the question and nodded in response. Mr. Carter, from what I know, you've always kept your identity under the pen name very secret. Why have you decided to reveal it now? Nathan Taylor, sitting next to Sophia Collins, glanced at her before joining in.